Mike's mother of all marinades.
I love my homemade barbecue marinades. The only problem is no one else does. So today I'm trying something new. Caramelized crispy pork belly tumbled in sea salt, red chili, black pepper and sugar. And sweet sticky chicken fillets in tangy mango, coconut and lime. This is amazing.
Yeah, because you didn't make it.
Introducing the new Fire Pit range, exclusively at Tesco. Food love stories, brought to you by Tesco. Available in the majority of larger stores while stocks last.
Google, Facebook and Twitter in pausing government user data requests. Chinese-owned app TikTok also pulls out of the city.
Brazil's president has another COVID-19 test after showing virus symptoms, and top US disease expert Anthony Fauci says any vaccine is likely to offer just time-limited protection. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And Sunak's latest pledge, the Chancellor will put £3 billion into green projects to fuel the UK recovery.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 1061 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
A very good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Naira Chahich. Good morning, everyone. It is coming up to 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Where's the bubble, Roger? Nasdaq hitting a record yesterday, and then we've got the unstoppable rally in Chinese stocks, which added $460 billion in market cap yesterday. That's the...
Morning, everybody. Let's recap what we have from yesterday. We still hold short positions on Japanese yen. That's 3 positions. Again, for new subscribers, what they can see on the screen, in the left-hand corner, they can see world market, all live prices. They can see Japanese yen, second chart, 1 minute chart, British pound against United States dollar, Canadian dollar against American dollar, Euro, and Bitcoin. All trades we make live in front of you. It's not delayed. The price is live, as you can see. 1 pip equals 100 pounds, except Bitcoin, where 1 pip equals 10 pounds. If somebody doesn't understand what pips means, they could search in Google and they can find out what it means. Okay? So let's see what this morning will bring us.
It seems quite a lot of what he's actually going to be saying in terms of his recovery plan formally being delivered on Wednesday. More billions, this time for the green agenda, trying to make sure government buildings at least are environmentally sound. All this coming as a way of trying to build confidence in what has been a reopening here, while there are still virus worries, of course, as well.
Roger, not that I want to be a complete cynic, but the numbers that have come out so far in terms of the stimulus for the UK don't seem that great, particularly as you've got the Resolution Foundation saying that we need an extra $250 billion in stimulus to combat the economic impact of the pandemic. And then I also start to question how effective some of the moves are going to be. For example, they're talking about investing more in job centres in the UK. Well, what's the point of that if there are no jobs to actually guide people to?
Well, yeah, a lot of it is going to be gestural inevitably, although I suppose investing in job centres actually creates jobs and the people you put in to run them. So
well, yeah, there is that. But
there's all those ways round on that one. But no, it is clearly highly political. It's a moment where Boris Johnson's speech that put out there, was it a week ago now, that there would be a big revival. It was Bill, all went down really like a deflated balloon. So this is Rishi Sunak trying to get more on the front foot again.
yeah, well, lots to discuss on that this hour. In the meantime, let's take a look at the markets 4 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe. As we were just saying, futures taking a little bit of a negative tone. The Stock 600 is opening to the downside, down 0.6%. So undoing, well, not quite half the gains that we saw yesterday of 1.6%. If we take a look across regional equity benchmarks in Europe, FTSE 100 down 0.7%. The CAC 40 is lower by the same. The DAX tracks lower by about 0.6%. The IBEX leads losses down 0.8%. FTSE MIB in the red to the tune of about 0.5 percentage point. The S&P 500 5-day rally. Nasdaq another record. Futures do point lower. S&P E-minis down 0.5%. Dow futures down 0.7%. Nasdaq futures just edging into the red, down 0.25 percentage point. In Asia, we did also see quite a bit of red on the screen. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index on a headline level was lower, snapping a 3-day rally. But of course, we continue to see that rally in Chinese equities extending world-beating gains so far this year. And then if we look across other assets, you are starting to see a bit of risk-off creep into these as well, because the 10-year Treasury yield is down a basis point towards a 66 handle. Yields down in the core and the periphery in Europe. The 10-year Bund yield down almost 2 basis points to negative 45. The 10-year gilt yield slips 2 basis points. The dollar is round about at a month low. However, in the European session, we've actually seen it firm up. So the Bloomberg dollar index is up 0.2% now, which sort of points to the risk off as well. In fact, you've got every G10 currency lower against the dollar. The Aussie dollar is one of the underperformers. What's sort of the tug of war for the Aussie dollar is the RBA standing pat on the one hand, and then the risks of a second wave in Australia on the other hand. And those second wave risks seem to have overtaken the Aussie, because that's down 0.4%. Taking a look at oil, that's slipping slightly, although extending losses now. WTI down 1.3%, $40.09 a barrel. Brent at 42.56, down 1.25 percentage points, Roger.
Right, let me just give you some breaking lines across the terminal from BMW. Their second quarter group sales are down 25.3%. Their second quarter mini China sales up 17.1%. And their first half electrified BMW mini vehicle sales up 3.4%. So a bit of a mixed picture there, overall not particularly strong. Let's move on to what the stocks are to watch this morning. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts joins us down the line from London. So, Ewan, first of all, Whitbread. Tell to me about Whitbread.
Morning, Roger. Yeah, first quarter trading update from the UK's biggest hotels brand. Now, many years ago, Whitbread, of course, was the brewer. They also started Costa Coffee. That's all gone now. They're focusing on the hotels business and a few restaurants thrown in as well. Now, they have 800 hotels. About 270 of those have reopened in the UK. They're currently expanding in Germany. All 19 hotels are open there. The chief executive, Alison Britton, sounding a fairly optimistic note about the future. She says it's a bit early to draw conclusions from the booking trajectory. She says that they're seeing good demand in traditional tourist destinations, but a lot of regions and metropolitan areas, particularly London, remain subdued. Now, a year ago, Whitbread shares were above £40. They're now trading below £25, and this morning down just a shade under 2%.
Right, let's also talk about Heidelberg Cement. What's going on there?
Yeah, the German cement giant writing down 3.4 billion euros in assets. Now, two things weighing on earnings at Heidelberg. One, the coronavirus pandemic, and secondly, our old friend Brexit uncertainty. Now, 2/3 of the impairment are from the business that the company acquired when it bought Hanson, the British conglomerate, back in 2007. Now, like the rest of the cement industry, it's facing a slowdown in sales as the coronavirus pandemic delayed building projects and put those on hold around the world. We heard back in May that Heidelberg would cut its dividend by 3/4 in order to preserve liquidity. The cement giant today saying that this will hurt profit, but it won't lead to a loss of cash. Heidelberg cement shares down 1.5% so far this morning.
All right, thanks very much, Ewan Potts. There was stocks to watch. I mentioned BMW earlier. Right now their shares just down a fraction, half of 1%. Naira.
A second quarter sales slump of a quarter, but a rebound in China, which was the bright spot. Let's get to our top stories then. And Britain is going to pump £3 billion into environmental projects as part of its plans to protect jobs in the wake of the pandemic. Bloomberg Westminster's Sebastian Salek reports on Rishi Sunak's latest spending plans.
The big numbers keep coming. Billions on fighting unemployment and reviving the arts industry, and now finding ways to make the green agenda part of the nation's recovery. The latest release from the Treasury includes about £1 billion to make public buildings more energy efficient. All this ahead of the Chancellor answering MPs' questions later today and his formal statement to Parliament on Wednesday. In London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And as Sebastian mentioned there, the Chancellor's taking questions from MPs in the House of Commons later today. We'll be bringing you that live on London DAB, followed by a special Bloomberg Westminster. You can catch all that from 11:30 London time this morning.
In Italy, the government plans to dramatically expand public investment. According to a draft blueprint for reform seen by Bloomberg, state investment will rise above 3% of GDP over the next 4 years. The plan takes into account grants and loans from the European Union's aid programmes that are still to be approved and will be discussed by leaders at a summit next week.
And in France, President Emmanuel Macron has reshuffled his government. Bruno Le Maire is staying as finance minister and Jean-Yves Le Drian remains at foreign affairs. In an effort to improve union relations, he's moving Elisabeth Borne to Labour and Social Affairs. And to work on delivering on the green agenda, he's appointed Barbara Pompili as Minister for Ecological Transition.
Hong Kong police have been given sweeping new powers under a new national security law. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
Police can now search a premises without a warrant issued by a judge. They can conduct online surveillance and seize electronic devices. Officers can freeze assets and seize property if the security minister says it's warranted. And they can take your travel documents and prevent you from leaving Hong Kong. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calls it Orwellian censorship. Google, Facebook, and Twitter have weighed in. They won't process requests from the Hong Kong government on user data while they study the law. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And we've heard more about big tech pushing back against the new security law there. ByteDance's TikTok has announced it's going to remove its app from the Hong Kong stores in coming days, becoming the first internet service to withdraw from the city. And Microsoft has also joined Google, Facebook, and Twitter in saying it won't process user data requests from the city government.
Now, Samsung has reported better than expected profits for the quarter. That's as surging internet traffic helped demand for its chips. The tech giant was also helped by gadget sales, which started recovering from the coronavirus slump. The company will break down divisional performance later this month.
Right, let's get the latest global news from Leanne Garris. Leanne, good morning. You're starting in Australia.
Yes, indeed, Roger. So the second most populous state has announced a 6-week lockdown across metropolitan Melbourne. That's as coronavirus outbreak there risks triggering a second wave of infections. From midnight on Wednesday, people must stay home except for at work, essential services, medical treatment or school. The state recorded 191 new cases overnight, the biggest daily increase since the crisis begun in Australia. And any coronavirus vaccine is likely to be limited in how long it can shield against the disease. That's according to U.S. infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci. The assumption had been that the protection would last until the end of the current virus cycle. On a video conference, Fauci warned we're still knee-deep in the first wave of the pandemic.
We're going to assume that there's a degree of protection, but we have to assume that it's going to be finite. It's not going to be like a measles vaccine. So there's going to be follow-up in those cases to see if we need a boost.
Here in the UK, the government has announced sanctions on 49 individuals and organisations from Russia, Saudi Arabia, North Korea and Myanmar. Bloomberg's Charles Capel has more.
Some of those sanctioned were involved in the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, prison camps and violence against Rohingya Muslims. The sanctions were announced by Foreign Minister Dominic Raab, who said kleptocrats or organised criminals won't be able to launder blood money in the UK. The sanctions are a part of the British version of the Magnitsky Act, named after the Russian lawyer who died in a Moscow jail in 2009. In London, Charles Capel, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And in Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro has undergone another test for COVID-19 after showing symptoms. The results will be available later today. According to CNN Brazil, the president is taking hydroxychloroquine. That's a medicine that's been claimed to combat the virus. But the World Health Organization has now dropped the drug from trials of effective treatments. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. The risk rally takes a pause. European equities opening to the downside this morning. We'll get into the details with Bloomberg MLive macro strategist Laura Cooper. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Emily Chang.
The latest research has found that almost 400,000 temporary visa holders and green card applicants have been affected by President Trump's latest executive order, barring them from entering the country until next year. For more on how this affects the U.S. tech industry, RF John Mohammed, a partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners, you've been focused on advising companies about how to deal with so much uncertainty ahead. You've got companies facing some pretty critical long-term decisions here. How do you think companies should be approaching this?
There's a lot that's happening in the world right now. One is COVID, second is immigration, third is a potential economic downturn. I think companies should be thinking long-term, not short-term, but also really thinking about how they could manage their short-term cash needs and balance that against coming out of the potential downturn much stronger. And for us, from our portfolio perspective, we've been spending a lot of time with our portfolio founders, really thinking about how to maximize cash runway, how to make sure that they have enough cash for the next at least 2 years, how they're thinking logically about hiring, how they're thinking logically about growth over the next few quarters and then next year, and then how they invest in technology.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash, and the equity rally seems to have taken a bit of pause with the European opening. Stocks 600 down 0.7%, FTSE down 0.8%, CAC down 0.9%, DAX down 0.9%, the IBEX down almost 1%, the FTSE MIB down 0.7%. Looking ahead to the US opening, also seems to be red on the screen. The S&P 500 down 0.6%, the Dow down 0.7%, and even the Nasdaq down 0.3% right now. Very much showing a reversal of what we've seen yesterday. But looking over to the bond market, US 10-year benchmark Treasuries at 66 basis points. That's down 1 basis point. Also seeing the gilts down a basis point as well, 18 basis points. And Bunds, negative 0.44, also down 1 basis point. So a run very much to havens, it seems there. They're also seeing strength in the dollar, which is stronger by 0.25% on the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index. In terms of cable, the pound is weaker by 0.1%, 1.2477. Oil also getting weaker, 1.11% down for WTI, $40.17 the barrel. Brent, 42.66, that's down just over 1%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Roger, thank you. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has reshuffled his government. Bruno Le Maire staying as finance minister and Jean-Yves Le Drian remains at foreign affairs. In an effort to improve union relations, he's moving Elizabeth Bourne to labour and social affairs. And to work on delivering the green agenda, he's appointed Barbara Pompili as Minister for Ecological Transition. Ghislaine Maxwell, the former associate of Jeffrey Epstein, has agreed to a hearing by video link on July the 14th, when she'll be formally charged and enter a plea. Maxwell has now been held in a federal jail in New York after being arrested last week on charges including conspiracy and enticing minors to engage in sex. She's really been seen in the past year since Epstein's arrest on charges of sex trafficking with underage women. And Beijing has reported 0 new coronavirus cases for the first time in 26 days. It's a sign that a resurgence that raised fears of a second wave in China is now under control. Instead of an across-the-board lockdown, Beijing deployed more targeted measures. They include testing more than 11 million people. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, European stocks opening lower this morning. The risk rally seems to be taking a pause after the Nasdaq hit another record high on Wall Street yesterday. Chinese stocks, though, extending gains after adding $460 billion in market cap in one day. Let's get into the markets with Bloomberg MLIV macro strategist Laura Cooper. Laura, great to have you with us. I've really been getting into the commentary around stocks versus volatility this morning. So SocGen is saying equities and volatility trading are at odds because the S&P 500 has rallied a whopping 40% from the March trough, whereas the VIX remains elevated at around double its February low. But so much matters in the way you actually see things, because you've actually got Evercore saying that, you know what, the VIX, 1/3 the level reached at the height of COVID-19. A move lower would be a bullish sign for US stocks. Mizuho says, though, it's possible investors don't fully appreciate the chances of vol in markets that are awash with stimulus. A lot of views there. Stocks versus volatility. Which is sending the correct signal? What's your view?
Well, I think at this stage, it's really quite a challenge to kind of say which is actually the better indicator in terms of forward direction. I certainly think that, you know, it is quite a conundrum to see elevated VIX at a time when stocks are rallying. And, you know, I would be in agreement that a move lower in VIX, likely around that 26 level, is really the key technical to watch. That would really portend to kind of more bullish momentum building in stocks. But I think, you know, whether that's a kind of a degree degree of complacency given the risk ahead. I think crucially when we look at other forces as well, so we're seeing kind of tightening high yield credit spreads, really the dollar has eased. So there does tend to be, just this kind of sense of calm in the markets. And I think maybe that's a little bit unwarranted, just given the fact that, potentially we do have hurdles ahead, just in terms of virus news counts, the potential for fresh lockdowns. And as well, we have earnings season approaching, and there could be some hurdles there. And even on the stimulus front, there's a number of things that maybe markets are becoming a little bit too complacent on.
And Laura, what about the tech rally? I mean, the Nasdaq hitting another record high, of course, on Wall Street yesterday. How sustainable is this tech rally?
I think the question really is, how sustainable the broader risk sentiment is, and then kind of delving a little bit deeper into those particular stocks is just how sustainable their profits are. So I think at this point we are seeing that these are quite crowded trades. Clearly the valuations are exceptionally frothy. And I think, if we were to see kind of risk sentiment take more of a hit, then we could see these secular growers that have really proven to be haven stocks continue to outperform. Now, if, however, we do see kind of growing domestic risk within the U.S., because that's where really at this stage the case counts are most alarming. We are seeing, stretched equity valuations more broadly there, while Europe and Asia, they're kind of more on a recovery path. So that could knock tech stocks there. I think crucially really is going to be tech earnings season that is approaching, and really whether they have actually outperformed as well in terms of the corporate profit outlooks going forward, because this is a period of time when they were meant to be kind of doing exceptionally well in this work from home type of environment.
For European stocks, Laura, is the question whether investors still see cyclical upside in markets and in the economy?
I mean, I think at this stage that does remain the broader theme. I mean, we certainly are seeing daily activity gauges in Europe begin to tick higher. We are seeing, signs of relative improvement compared to the U.S., where, we clearly are not seeing that. And just on a relative valuation basis, there is attractiveness in European equities. I think crucially at this stage, it's all about kind of the fiscal capacity in Europe and whether we do see the hurdle of the EU recovery fund coming to fruition, and whether that can continue to support that kind of bullish momentum within Europe.
Thanks very much indeed, Laura. Laura Cooper there, Bloomberg's MLive macro strategist, talking about what some seem to be a lot of contradictory signals out there, what they really mean there for where the market should be.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of today, the signals aren't that contradictory in the sense that you're seeing the Stock 600 down almost 0.9%. You're seeing U.S. equity futures lower, but yields dropping as well. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Bulls continue to charge on Wall Street. The S&P is on a 5-session winning streak. Paul Richards of Medley Global Advisors says we've seen a big turnaround in sentiment in just the last week.
A week ago, the market was concerned with the Dow testing 25,000, S&P testing 3,000, and here we are 7 days later, and we've even got the China state media telling us to buy stocks.
We start with the Dow nearing 26,300 and the S&P at just under 3180. Microsoft may be interested in buying AT&T's Warner Brothers interactive video game business, according to the tech blog The Information. AT&T has not yet decided whether to sell, though it is said to be considering it. Even as Florida remains a COVID-19 hotspot, Governor Ron DeSantis is praising virus prevention efforts at the state's theme parks. He says he's impressed with what Universal has done. He calls Disney's plan very thorough as it prepares to reopen this weekend. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
The doors are opening. When is that moment out in the distant future? Some things will be as they were, others forever changed.
The restaurant industry will never be the same.
Follow every new development here on Bloomberg Radio.
What do we need in terms of maybe the new school of economic thought?
Because the next best thing to magic is insight.
It may take nearly a decade for the U.S. economy to recover.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
IBKR is the professional's gateway to the world's markets. IBKR offers commissions starting at $0 for U.S.-listed stocks and ETFs, enhanced price execution via IB Smart Routing, and access to our powerful trader workstation, web, mobile, and API trading platforms. In addition, our clients enjoy the lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, fixed income, and more on over 125 markets in 31 countries. Learn more or open an IBKR integrated investment account at ibkr.com.
Elite advisory firms rely on BN.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Yay! Just the news you needed this morning. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that washing machine can handle all that laundry. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Tuesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most. Hi, Mum. From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, the risk rally taking a little bit of a pause. If you look across stock markets, 30 minutes into the equity market open in Europe, the Stock 600 is down 0.8%. Regional equity benchmarks posting a lot of red. The FTSE 100 and CAC 40 and DAX all down by 1%. The FTSE MIB down almost 1.2%. That's the IBEX down almost 1.2%. The FTSE MIB in the red, though, nonetheless down 0.6%. A 5-day rally for the S&P 500. The Nasdaq hitting a record. Futures point to a lower open in the US session, though. S&P E-minis down almost 0.8%. Nasdaq futures lower by 0.5%, and Dow futures down almost 1 percentage point. And the risk-off sentiment is reflected across asset classes because the 10-year Treasury yield is down 1.5 basis points, 66 handle. 10-year Bund yield slips 2 basis points, but you are seeing yields move lower in the core and the periphery. The 10-year gilt yield moves lower by 2 basis points to an 18 handle. It's been a pretty good run in terms of dollar weakness. The dollar at a 1-month low, 5 days of declines, but that's changing in today's session as it firms up 0.3% on the Bloomberg Dollar Index. All G10 currencies lower against it. The Aussie dollar has been one of the underperformers, and the two things being weighed up here with the Aussie today seem to be, okay, you had the RBA standing pat on rates. It was expected, but on the other hand, concerns around a second wave in Australia with the Melbourne metropolitan area imposing a 6-week lockdown. And then taking a look at commodities, you're seeing oil actually extend some declines from earlier in the session. WTI down 1.2%, 40.15, Brent at 42.65, down 1%, Roger.
Right, let's have a look at some of today's top stories. Now, Hong Kong police have been given sweeping new powers under a new national security law. Bloomberg's Karen Lee reports from Hong Kong.
Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam defended national security legislation imposed on the city by China, and her government asserted broad new police powers, including warrantless searches, online surveillance, and property seizures. Lam said at a Tuesday briefing that the law would be enforced very stringently. Her comments came after the Hong Kong government said new rules for police were intended to help prevent, suppress, and impose punishment for offenses endangering national security. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Meanwhile, big tech is pushing back against Hong Kong's new security law. ByteDance's TikTok will remove its app from Hong Kong stores in coming days, becoming the first internet service to withdraw from the city. And Google, Facebook, Microsoft and Twitter all say they won't process user data requests from the city's government. It comes amid concerns the new legislation could criminalise protests and hurt human rights. And, you know, despite all the different threads and concern around Hong Kong, Roger, we did actually see the Hang Seng go into a bull market yesterday. So weakness across Asian stocks today, but of course that unstoppable rally in China has also caught our attention. It's extended gains today, $460 billion added in market cap in just yesterday's session to Chinese stocks. The yuan also strengthening through 7 for the first time since March.
Yeah, extraordinary moves there in China. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays in the next few days. Now, in France, President Emmanuel Macron has reshuffled his government. Bruno Le Maire is staying as finance minister. Jean-Yves Le Drian remains at foreign affairs. In an effort to improve union relations, he's moving Elisabeth Borne to Labour and social affairs. And to work on delivering on the green agenda, he's appointed Barbara Pompili as Minister for Ecological Transition.
And finally, Samsung has reported better than expected profits for the quarter. That's as surging internet traffic helped demand for its chips. The tech giant was also helped by gadget sales, which started recovering from the coronavirus slump. The company will break down divisional performance later this month.
Right, let's get the latest now in global news from Leanne Guerin. So, Leanne, you begin in Australia.
Yes, indeed, Roger. So the second most populous state has announced a 6-week lockdown across metropolitan Melbourne. That's as a coronavirus outbreak risks triggering a second wave of infections. From midnight on Wednesday, people must stay home except for work, essential services, medical treatment or school. The state recorded 191 new cases overnight, the biggest daily increase since the crisis begun in Australia. Now, New Zealand has moved to limit the number of citizens flying home with the national airline to reduce pressure on its overflowing quarantine facilities. Bloomberg's Matthew Brockett has all the details.
The government has asked Air New Zealand to put a 3-week hold on new bookings for inbound flights, as thousands of Kiwis living abroad flock back to the coronavirus-free nation. The border remains closed to foreigners, and returning citizens or residents must serve 2 weeks in a managed isolation facility on arrival. Over 26,000 people have been through such facilities since the end of March. The government says it is working to increase its quarantine capacity. In Wellington, Matthew Brockett, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
In Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro has had another test for COVID-19 after showing symptoms. He's told his supporters an exam showed his lungs are clean.
In my particular case, given my history of athleticism, if I was to be infected with the virus, I would not have to worry. I would not feel it. It would be like a little flu or like being under the weather.
The results will be available today. According to CNN Brazil, the president is taking hydroxychloroquine. That's a medicine that's been claimed to combat the virus. But the World Health Organization has now dropped the drug from trials of effective treatments. And Beijing has reported 0 new coronavirus cases. That's for the first time in 26 days. It's a sign that a resurgence that raised fears of a second wave in China is now under control. Instead of an across-the-board lockdown, Beijing deployed more targeted measures. They included testing more than 11 million people. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thanks for that. Now, later this morning, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak's going to go into Parliament and take questions from MPs. That comes ahead, of course, a major policy announcement tomorrow on how he's going to steer the UK economy through the next phase of the pandemic. Now, part of this is expected now to include £3 billion of green spending to stimulate the economy. I'm joining now by Ros Matheson, who's Bloomberg's executive editor for international government in London. Ros, good morning, welcome. These green spending pledges, I mean, they sound like big numbers. When you compare to what's being spent in Germany or France, they don't seem quite so big, do they?
Well, that's an interesting thing. It's a bit like last week when Boris Johnson promised to accelerate £5 billion of planned infrastructure spending. That's money that they've already pledged to spend. And same with the green spending stuff that we're hearing about today. The £3 billion is just part of the £9.2 billion that they pledged for energy efficiency in the election manifesto last year. And as you say, £1 billion of that, rather, will go on improving the energy efficiency of schools and hospitals. Some of it will go on a pilot project installing insulation and alternative heat sources in social housing. But even so, at £3 billion, it's a drop in the ocean compared to what countries like France and Germany are putting forward, where they're really focused on a green-led recovery in their economies from the coronavirus and heavy spending in those areas. And this is exactly, money that they've already pledged and are much smaller than other countries are saying that they're going to spend.
Yeah, and you've got the Resolution Foundation, Ros, saying that saving 1 million UK jobs requires a $250 billion stimulus plan. Yes, OK, we've heard that there could be some plans, for example, to increase investment in job centres. I said to Roger earlier, what's the point in job centres if there aren't any jobs to send people into? Although, of course, you do need to employ the people in the job centres. We don't need to get into that. But my ultimate question is, what actually needs to be done to support workers with the furlough programme set to end later this year? Is there a sense the government's going to do enough?
Well, that is the big question. Of course, given what we've seen so far, they are under some pressure to introduce a more meaningful package of measures, especially as the furlough program starts to taper off. Beyond the Resolution Foundation, what we're hearing is that almost half of companies are expecting to let go of staff when the job retention program ends, and that's raising the risk of what they call long-term scarring of the economy. Sunak has said that he will do a bigger fiscal package in a budget in the fall, but what companies are saying is that we can't wait that long because the onus is going to fall back on us to continue to pay staff and to retain staff, and we can't afford to do that. So what you're hearing is a lot of calls for direct wage subsidies, for example, to continue. No sign of that so far, though, in what we're expecting tomorrow.
And Ros, very brief, just a couple of sentences. Are we going to see stamp duty cuts, national insurance, VAT?
Well, quite possibly a cut to stamp duty. That's sort of a tax holiday for home buyers, of course, in terms of the level of the duty that they pay, and a temporary cut in VAT. But it'll be really a patchwork of things that we're expecting to see tomorrow, bits and pieces in different sectors, and none of it lasting very long.
Great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Ros Matheson, Bloomberg's executive editor for international government in London. And coming up, we will speak to Accenture's European CEO on how the pandemic is playing out for European business and what it needs to do to stay competitive, also what it will take for the worst hit to survive. Don't miss that interview coming up next. And meanwhile, European equities are in the red today. We're generally seeing the global risk rally take a little bit of a pause. This is Bloomberg.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man. You, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
The market is unpredictable. BAM gives you certainty. In the face of volatility and illiquidity, BAM-insured municipal bonds deliver default protection, value preservation, and a durable AA rating from S&P. BAM's insurance protects against everything that causes a default, including natural disasters, financial fraud, pension issues, and economic disruption, like the one we're experiencing right now. BAM. Build America Mutual. Ask your broker about BAM-insured municipal bonds.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Have you wanted to speak a new language?
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work-from-home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
When family video calls are too good to miss. Your virtual quiz team is demanding a rematch. And one more episode just isn't enough. You need loads of data. Get a massive 30 gig for £10 a month from Smarty Mobile. With no speed restrictions, unlimited calls and texts, and a flexible 1-month plan, it's no wonder you Switch awarded Smarty Best Values SIM-Only Network 2020. Search Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. See smarty.co.uk.
Ever wondered how people's postcode lottery works? Easy. Your postcode is your ticket. And every weekday it gives you the chance to win £1,000 or £30,000 every weekend. And every month players in your postcode could win a share of £3 million. Join in at postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of July to play in the August draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 18 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Are you ready to play?
This summer ITV Hub is fully loaded with loads more full series.
Gonna get messy.
Yeah, like it's fuller than ever. From Love Island to Liar, we have divas lined up back to back.
Filmy and Sister.
From the GC and the Ibiza Weekender reps to the Real Housewives, it's round full of lots and lots of...
This is getting too much now.
Laughs, tears and smiles. It's crammed full with full series like Quiz, Flesh and Blood, Harry's Heroes and Manx in Mumbai. We've grown, expanded and just gone a bit extra this summer.
Give me some on.
ITV Hub fully loaded this summer.
The best experience possible.
Did we mention it's looking fuller than ever?
You always say the best thing you ever did was join up. I bet you don't get the same experiences in Civvy Street. Remember those incredible family adventures? And that feeling of being part of something special. We'd love to have you back. Go on. Feel the pride again. Search RAF Rejoiners.
Mike's mother of all marinades.
I love my homemade barbecue marinades. The only problem is no one else does. So today I'm trying something new. Caramelised crispy pork belly tumbled in sea salt, red chilli, black pepper and sugar. And sweet sticky chicken fillets in tangy mango, coconut and lime. This is amazing.
Yeah, because you didn't make it.
Introducing the new Fire Pit range, exclusively at Tesco. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco. Available in the majority of larger stores while stocks last.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning, I'm Roger here with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash, and the global equity rally seems to have taken a bit of a pause on Tuesday. Strong start to the week, of course, but European shares now slipping alongside US future stock. 600 fell by 0.7%, dragged down by banks and healthcare shares. Data also showing German industrial production rose less than forecast in May. The FTSE 100 down just over 1%, the CAC down 0.8%, the DAX down 0.9%, the IBEX down almost 1%, and the FTSE MIB down 0.3%. As I said, US futures also looking to be a bit risk off this morning. S&P 500 down 0.7%, the Dow down 0.9%, the Nasdaq down almost 0.5% as well. And staying in perhaps what is some kind of haven rush as a result of all this, US 10-year Treasury benchmark 66 basis points is the handle. That's down 1 basis point. Bunds also down 1.5 basis points, negative 0.44 basis points. Gilts down a bit as well, down almost 2 basis points at 0.18 is the yield. Looking also at the dollar, weaker by, or strong in fact I should say, by 0.3% this morning. In terms of cable, 1.2476 is where we are. The pound weaker by 0.1%. And oil weakening slightly too. WTI down 1.18% at $40.15 the barrel. Brent $42.67 the barrel. That's down 1%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Roger, thank you. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has reshuffled his government. Bruno Le Maire is staying as finance minister, and Jean-Yves Le Drian remains at foreign affairs. In an effort to improve union relations, he's moving Elizabeth Bourne to Labour and Social Affairs. And to work on delivering the green agenda, he's appointed Barbara Pompili as Minister for Ecological Transition. Now, US infectious disease chief Anthony Fauci says any coronavirus vaccine would be limited in how it would provide protection. He told a video conference that House officials say a shot would offer a degree of protection, but it's likely to be finite. Fauci expects there'll be an answer by early 2021 as to whether any of the more than 140 vaccines being developed would be safe and indeed effective. And finally, the coronavirus crisis is set to spark the biggest retreat for meat eating in decades. Per capita consumption is set to fall almost 3%, according to data from the United Nations. There's a swirl of factors contributing to this change. The coronavirus economic fallout means consumers are cutting down on grocery bills and eating out much less. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, I saw this story yesterday and I thought to myself, this is right up Leanne's street. I hope she does it in World News tomorrow. It's like we're really in tune. What's so interesting about it, though, is just how widespread this shift has been, because you can imagine it happening in certain, perhaps younger parts of the population, more environmentally conscious, but this is something that's happening in the US, in Europe and in China.
Yes, it is. And obviously, China, which I didn't realize, actually accounts for a quarter of meat-eating consumption. But since we've seen the coronavirus pandemic, this has really dwindled off, which is also interesting. And I think it's also, we're seeing it from the US to Brazil and Germany. So there's lots of different aspects to this. But what's more interesting is climate change. People have been calling for this for so long because of the greenhouse gases permitted from farming and keeping animals. But maybe this is a change that was due to come anyway, because we've seen a lot of millennials nowadays choose to live a more sort of vegan, environmentally friendly life.
Much like
just before
yourself.
Roger, sorry Roger,
Much
just
like
before you
yourself.
jump in, I love the comment from the German agriculture minister. A balanced diet does not include meat and sausages every day. You hear that?
Oh no, so that's me done for then, really.
Well, you can have vegetarian sausages one day and pork sausages the next.
No. You haven't got things have to be as they are. They look like.
Exactly. I'm not for meat replacements. It's meat or no meat. Yes.
Everything in moderation.
Oh gosh, what a time of the day to say that. Never mind.
Leanne Gerrans with the World News, thank you so much. Now, new research from Accenture has found that 2/3 of business leaders globally are optimistic that the European market will make a relatively fast recovery from the economic downturn caused by the pandemic, but they see an over-reliance on government support as the biggest risk for European business. Joining us now is Accenture's European CEO Jean-Marc Olanier. Jean-Marc, great to have you with us on the show. Thank you so much for joining. It's interesting, within that 66%, 29% expect the recovery in Europe to be V-shaped. 37%, though, expect the slower, steady, perhaps more worrying U-shaped recovery in the next 12 months. But I wanted to pick up on that point about the concern on over-reliance on government support, because a lot of people have really been celebrating the fiscal steps that Europe has been taking, not to mention what the ECB is doing. But why is it actually worrying businesses?
Yes, good morning, and happy to join you, all of you, this morning. Yes, first of all, maybe let me stay on the positive news, because it's always good, as we listen to many of you, there's not always good news coming out of this COVID-19 situation. And it was good to get the view not only from macroeconomists or industry leaders, but from the business leaders that are running large enterprise, and to get their views on. And as you said, their view is more optimistic, because they realize that the rebound may happen. And in fact, when you look at it by industry, many industry will be back to some kind of normality in the next 12 months, as you mentioned. And yes, some industry will take longer, and that's why we do not have, only a V-shape for all the industry. And sometimes we know that some industry will have to take a longer term in order to reposition themselves. But I think Europe is a bit at crossroads now. For many years we comment on the fact that European performance was a bit lagging behind in terms of productivity, profitability, market capitalization, the US companies or even the Chinese companies sometimes. And I think the European leaders want to leverage these situations to accelerate. And in order to accelerate, they need to have the right environment for that. And that's why they're asking and they are welcoming, all the initiatives that are happening currently at European level to ensure they are having a proper environment to invest and capture the rebound that they expect to come.
But Jean-Marc, what about innovation? Because that's obviously a key changing thing, initiatives in that sort of area. Now, interesting figures, more than half of European respondents said they are slowing investments in innovation and won't relaunch any initiatives in the next 6 months. And that compares with 33% in North America and 49% in the Asia Pacific. What should we read into that?
Yeah, I think, and that's the risk we have, is that, and that's why we are, recommending very strongly for kind of an acceleration of investment in innovation, in new technology. What business leaders have learned is that technology innovation has been the key driver of resilience business during the crisis. We have had a demonstration at scale, at the global level, that companies that do leverage technology innovation better than others have been more resilient during the crisis. They have been able to work remotely with their employees. They have been able to connect with their customer. They have been able to deal with their supply chain more effectively.
Yeah.
So it is really important we accelerate those investments in order to prepare for the rebound that seems to come.
Yeah, and that comes back to the point I was asking about the risk of being over-reliant on government support, because the risk then is that companies stay on the defensive and don't invest in these game-changing innovations you've been talking about, Jean-Marc. But the other thing that I found interesting in the report was where you talk about leveraging technology to reinvent the industrial sector. Do you think we'll see more companies in Europe bring supply chains home to prevent against the supply chain risk of another disruption like COVID-19 or even something else like US-China trade?
Yeah, and this is something we specifically asked because there is, as you mentioned, a big debate in Europe around relocalization. And it's very interesting to say when we talk to the business that are, business leaders that are running big factoring or manufacturing business around Europe, they all vote very strongly for leveraging more digital into product life management, engineering, and manufacturing. 40 to 50% of them believe those technology will have a material impact on their performance. Only 10% of them believe relocalization of supply chain will make a big difference. A bit more for R&D centers, but it's 20%. But frankly, most of it vote very much in favor of adoption of new technology more than considering vast relocalization of supply chain or manufacturing business.
Jean-Marc, very quickly, if I may, why isn't Europe doing the kind of investing in the rebound that they need to now?
I think this is up to the players, now to make the call. I think Europe has we have done that survey just in May, so just during the lockdown period. The shock has been enormous, as you know, for many of the players. So I can understand some of our, business leaders still being a bit prudent because they want to see how the shock, will be absorbed by their P&L, their ability to invest. But the strong message that we are seeing here is that if you want to capture the rebound that is coming, we know that those investments will be required, and you need to ensure your P&L help you to afford those investments because they will make the difference in the competitive landscape. Because U.S. company, Chinese company will invest, and this is the next race that we have ahead of us.
Jean-Marc Olanier, European CEO of Accenture. Thank you. This is Bloomberg.
Are you looking for senior care?
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts, here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this morning. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that washing machine can handle all that laundry. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Tuesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
At Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London.
DAB digital. Hopefully you've just switched over from TV. You know, I tell everybody every day, Anna.
You do, daily.
At the end of our television program, turn off the TV and switch over to Bloomberg Radio. I think it's a fantastic way to get your news, your information, and you can continue the conversation with us.
And not at all upsetting for our TV friends, but they're not listening now, so that's fine. We need to do a couple of things here, Matt. We need to get to the data, but before we do that, I'm just going to mention we've got the EU's new forecasts around GDP, and then I'll let you talk about Deutsche Bank, because that's also interesting. The EU sees the euro area 2020 GDP at minus 8.7%. That is versus minus 7.7% in their May forecast. So that is the EU's assessment of how much the euro area economy will shrink in 2020. It's getting worse, essentially. Their forecast, at least, has worsened between May and June. What I found really interesting as well is looking at some of the country specifics around their last forecast. Even places that had a good crisis that dealt with the pandemic well, such as Greece, they're absolutely not going to be unscathed because, of course, of the difficulty with getting tourism back in action as a result of all this. But anyway, that's part of the conversation. We'll get to the data in a moment. But do you want to look at, do you want to mention what's coming up with Deutsche Bank?
Well, you know, there's this story today, which a lot of people are saying Deutsche Bank is partnering with Google. And, you know,
and you don't like the word partner?
I take issue with that. It's not really a partnership. That's like saying I'm going to partner with Pizza Hut later today. The fact is, Deutsche Bank is buying services from Google, cloud computing services, and it's a big, long contract. It's a 10-year contract. So it's a fascinating story. They say they're going to invest in tech together, I'm sure. But think about, you know, the difference between these two companies, really Alphabet, I should say, not Google. But we're talking about a tech company that's worth over $1 trillion, that basically owns the world. And Deutsche Bank is, you know, a German lender that's worth like $18 billion. So,
not a partnership of equals anyway.
Not
18 billion euros market cap. But the conversation will be about that. I think the word partnership referred perhaps to some specific co-investments they're making. But anyway,
yes, I know.
There are other parts of the story. But also, Matt, Wirecard's going to be interesting in this conversation.
Totally. I mean, the whole story, I'm not downplaying. It's huge for our listeners and for our viewers because, you know, a lot of them work at Deutsche Bank, obviously. And it's still, you know, a giant employer. They have 87,000 people working at Deutsche Bank. It's massively important to the German economy and to the German government. And then the Wirecard story is unbelievable. Deutsche Bank may end up buying parts of that failed business. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. The CEO, Christian Saving of Deutsche Bank, the CEO, is going to be speaking with our German bureau chief, Daniel Schaefer, who himself is really an amazing journalist. So it's going to be great to hear this conversation. We'll bring you highlights throughout the hour because they're starting to talk. They're talking now.
We'll have good coverage of that conversation taking place. Quick data check for you then before we get to our guest. The Stock 600 down 0.6% today. So we're taking a breather, taking a pause, retreating slightly from the lofty heights of yesterday. This time yesterday we were sitting on a stock rally in China of more than 5%. That then led on to a stock rally on the NASDAQ that took us into uncharted territory, and some of those big tech names rallying really strongly yesterday. So after all of that, we're just taking a bit of a breather, it would seem. So down a touch, down less than 1%. Though in European equity markets, very few areas of brightness, and US futures actually do point to the downside as well, so we should expect some of that negativity to continue on risk assets. The Brent price, so the oil price, down 0.7%, so that moves in tandem with other risk assets. And on a day like today, no surprise, we're seeing a bid for the dollar, so the dollar is stronger on a trade weighted basis, up around 0.3%. Matt?
All right, so let's bring in to talk about, you mentioned the trade-weighted dollar, to talk about that. Simon Harvey joins us from Monex Europe. It's one of the biggest FX traders in the world. He's a market analyst there. And Simon, you were on television with us earlier today. We were talking about the dollar and saying, you know, it seems like when we're risk on, the greenback just loses, well, the dollar index falls. And when it's risk off, people pile back into it. Is it as much of a safe haven as, the yen or the 10-year, for example?
Thank you for having me. I just want to start off that you've made me think about pizza way too early in the morning. But when it comes to the dollar, this kind of question is one we only really found out the answer for last week. Everyone was discussing. We had a lot of questions coming in as well. How is the dollar going to perform as a haven when it's battling with its own economic slowdown? Because you've got this dynamic of the US economy is slowing down because of the COVID outbreak, which also drags on the global economic recovery. Does the dollar sell off in this as opposed to, people flooding into Japanese yen, into the Swiss franc, or does the dollar still perform even though its economy is arguably one of the worst in battling the actual outbreak? So it was a question that we didn't really know the answer to until last week, and then today is another flashpoint to suggest that the US dollar still has this haven dynamic about it, that even though the US economy is battling, especially the Sun Belt area in the south, the investors are still happy to pick up the dollar in times of stress and in times of uncertainty with regards to the global economic outlook. So, you can't write it off. People have been writing it off for a long time. Unfortunately, if I keep defending the dollar, I might be getting a call from David Bloom at HSBC on this. But it's something that you can't keep saying and saying, and it keeps coming back to bite people. And you've just got to take it on the chin now that if you are calling the dollar to weaken, you've got to have a really solid argument. And we don't necessarily see the outlook being, so comprehensive at the moment for.
And David certainly doesn't think that anything's going to come to take away the dollar's crown. Let's talk about the euro though, because today we see money going into the dollar, coming out of the euro. This is the typical sort of risk-off flow that we're seeing in this morning's session. Do you think that there is upside or downside from now associated with the recovery fund? Has the euro rallied as far as it's going to rally on that recovery fund?
We don't necessarily think so, just because you have to factor in the spike on the recovery fund after the Merkel-Macron announcement, and I think markets have definitely taken it all with a pinch of salt, and they've learned their lesson that when it comes to joint fiscal policy in the EU, it's like turning an oil tanker. It's not a sharp move. It's not something that's overnight all of a sudden going to become legislation, and all of a sudden it's passed and everything's released. So they almost knew that the headlines coming in, they couldn't bake it in completely to euro dollar. And what we've seen over the last week in IMM positioning as well is that people were actually starting to pick up the dollar again and the one they were mainly shorting again was the euro. And these kind of areas, the Eurozone economy is still very tentative. You've still got that recovery fund, and people aren't necessarily optimistic of it being a very quick turnaround, almost like Brexit. It's this kind of ongoing story. So I think there's still upside on the euro, but it won't necessarily be the smoothest transition.
Simon, when I ask FX traders what are the hottest pairs out there, anytime really over the last few weeks and months, Aussie dollar always comes up. Why is it such a popular pair to trade, and what do you think about Aussie?
Yeah, it's just a really interesting currency. It has this kind of period where it goes underneath the radar, and then all of a sudden it just hits back. It's this very small open economy that again is very susceptible to the global cycle when it comes to economics. So it's very interesting that it will have this higher volatility, kind of like the Norwegian krone, because of its attachment to oil, and it gives you that volatility within the G10 space that you're kind of missing if you're not playing with emerging markets. So, people are always talking about the Aussie, and when you put on top of that is links to China, the Chinese economic recovery, looser financial conditions in China after the PBOC relaxed interest rates, and then you put on top of that again the fact that they controlled the virus relatively well. They're leading what's going on in Europe and North America by some way. Couple of weeks with regards to some European countries, arguably months when it comes to assessing America. And people are looking at the Australian economy and the New Zealand economy and how they're handling the outbreak and the economic disaster caused by it, and kind of mapping that back across. So it's definitely the currency to look out for. It's definitely the economy to look out for, because it has this kind of front-running characteristic about it.
Okay, thanks very much, Simon. Really good to speak to you today on TV and here on Bloomberg Radio. Simon Harvey joining us from Monex. While Simon's been giving us his thoughts, Matt, on the FX markets, we've been watching for news lines coming out of the Deutsche Bank CEO Christian Sewing speaking on a Bloomberg webinar with our German bureau chief. And there's one red headline, Sewing saying that there's positive fixed income momentum, and that has continued into the month of June. So an interesting up-to-date check on how this is all going down at Deutsche Bank.
Yeah, it's fascinating. He said that first quarter positive momentum continued in the second quarter, and now the positive fixed income momentum continuing into June. He has said, obviously, that the pandemic is making everything more complex, and that should be apparent. I haven't seen the feed, but I think that our bureau chief, Daniel Schaefer, is in the Frankfurt bureau, and Christian Sewing is in the Twin Towers, like right across the street. Deutsche Bank has its own television studios, by the way, really sophisticated television studio, to be honest.
Well, we will see what comes through from that. We'll continue to watch those news lines. For the moment, let's get an update on global news. Let's get to Caroline.
Thank you so much, Anna. Matt, good morning. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has defended the national security legislation imposed on the city last week.
I'm glad to see that in the past few days that some have come to acknowledge that there is a positive aspect of the law, that is, it will help to promote stability and prosperity in Hong Kong. And you can see in the market that's been the direction taken.
Carrie Lam speaking there through a translator. She confirmed that much of the implementation of the new law would be managed in secret. Her comments came hours after her government asserted also broad new police powers. They include warrantless searches, online surveillance and property seizure. Here in the UK, the government will pump £3 billion into environmental projects as part of its recovery plan. The investment will formally be announced tomorrow when Chancellor Rishi Sunak gives an update on the UK's economic plans. He's under pressure to introduce a meaningful package after the Prime Minister's own speech failed to impress many economists. And finally, in Australia, the second most populous state has announced a 6-week lockdown across metropolitan Melbourne. That's as coronavirus and an outbreak there risks triggering a second wave of infections. From midnight on Wednesday, people must stay home except for work and essential services, medical treatment or school. The state recorded 191 new cases overnight, the biggest daily increase since the crisis began. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Caroline Hepker. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Caroline, thanks very much for that. Really appreciate it. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about a fascinating topic here on Bloomberg. We're going to get an opinion piece on Samsung. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion or your race or because you have children or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Sudden shock or sustained slowdown? When uncertainty threatens, shareholders look to the C-suite to maintain profitability. And for 2 decades, the leaders of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies have turned to GEP for results. GEP's procurement and supply chain solutions help reduce costs, improve performance, and boost EBITDA, helping great companies stay on track and primed for the next phase of the business cycle. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience, an ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Carolyn Hyde.
Let's stick with some of the deals as well that we've seen. Uber's latest deal. Scott Kessler of Third Bridge is with us. Scott, I want to start off by talking about a little bit of M&A to kick off this Monday, because we did get an exit from Postmates, not the public exit that perhaps it might have once upon a time looked for, but it's being bought up by Uber. How does it help the food delivery part of the business for Uber?
So, look, this is a deal that I think people were possibly thinking about. We saw some consolidation in this category announced relatively recently when JustEatTakeaway.com announced its pending purchase of Grubhub. There was chatter that Uber was also interested in Grubhub. So I think a lot of people were probably thinking that Uber was looking to make a move. And when you look at Uber Eats, according to data from Second Measure, at least as of May, they had a little bit over 20% share in the U.S. Postmates had 8%. So that would essentially get them to the clear number 2 business in the category behind only DoorDash. And it would put them ahead relatively clearly of Grubhub.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. This is a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. I promised you a fascinating story on Samsung. That's because the second quarter earnings looked great, but the shares fell. Revenue beat estimates by around 3.6%. Operating profit topped even the highest sell-side analyst estimate by 6.3%. Right off the bat, though, the company posted a one-time gain related to its display business that would have helped the bottom line. So as a result, we're seeing those shares fall. In fact, shares across Asia didn't do so well, and in Europe we see only red arrows here. So equity indexes are down. The FTSE 100 in London off 61 points to 62.24 right now. The CAC and the DAX both down about 7 or 0.8%. If you're preparing for the U.S. Open, we see futures that are showing red arrows as well. Dow futures look the worst, down 0.8%. S&P futures down 0.6%. NASDAQ futures down almost 0.33%. So that's your Bloomberg Radio Business Flash for now. Let's get back over to Caroline Hepker with more global news headlines. Caroline?
Thank you so much, Matt. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has reshuffled his government. Bruno Le Maire is staying on as finance minister, and Jean-Yves Le Drian, a veteran socialist, of course, remains at foreign affairs. In an effort to improve union relations, though, Macron is moving Elisabeth Borne to Labour and Social Affairs, and to work on delivering the green agenda, Macron has appointed Barbara Pompili as Minister for Ecological Transition. Ghislaine Maxwell, the former associate of Jeffrey Epstein, has agreed to a hearing by video link on the 14th of July when she will be formally charged and enter a plea. Maxwell is now being held in a federal jail in New York after being arrested last week on charges including conspiracy and enticing minors to engage in sex. She has rarely been seen in the past year since Epstein's arrest on charges of sex trafficking underage women. And Beijing has reported 0 new coronavirus cases for the first time in 26 days. It's a sign that a resurgence that raised fears of a second wave in China is now under control. Instead of an across-the-board lockdown, Beijing deployed a more targeted set of measures. They included testing more than 11 million people. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Caroline Hepker. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you very much. Let's get back to Frankfurt now, where Bloomberg's bureau chief for Germany, Daniel Scheffler, is sitting down with the Deutsche Bank CEO, Christian Saving. Daniel has been asking about working from home, the work from home setup, whether he imagines less travel. What kind of impact is working from home and COVID going to have on the cost base of the bank? Let's listen.
There is also ways that for the first competitors are doing more active client meetings on site again, and I tell you, it will be a trend again. So I wouldn't say it's minus X%, but I'm sure that internal meetings where, despite all cost discipline, this bank traveled too much for internal reasons, that also transatlantic meetings for 1 day or 2 days, that we will be far more thoughtful about this and try to limit that, and not only for cost reasons, but really for efficient reasons, and why also our counterparts and stakeholders and clients, they have learned actually that you can handle it via video in a nice way. You actually save the travel time, and therefore, again, I do think that for certain functions, in particular in the back office, it is a very material reduction in travel. For client meetings, I'm very reluctant to give you a percentage time, but I'm sure that also for client meetings, it is more than 10 or 20%. I'm absolutely sure, because that's the feedback we also get from our clients.
Okay. I wanted to go... Okay, I placed an order and it was executed for British pound. I sold short at 1.24896. So position opened at 1.24896, short position.
I think in a base case scenario, and I'm obviously not talking about a downside scenario that we have a full-blown second infection wave globally, if you take that aside and you have this gradual recovery, which we are seeing right now, then we will see the peak in Q2, exactly like forecasted by Stuart and by James over the last, by the way, already 3 or 4 months. And that is driven in particular not by individual defaults, but rather by the forward-looking indicators, according to IFRS 9, that we have to take that into account right now. And then you can, that actually in Q3 and Q4, you see a reduction in loan loss provisions compared to Q2 and Q1, because we digested the stage 1 and stage 2 development. So looking at the environment, looking at the forecast, looking at the base case forecast, how the pandemic plays out, I'm convinced that Q2 is the peak, and that overall, Stuart and James, and I'm fully behind that, just to reconfirm to the market that the full year is looking at 35 to 45 bips in terms of loan loss provisions. That is almost doubling from last year, but if we compare ourselves to peers, now we see the benefit of our loan book, the diversification, and also the benefit, to be honest, having our home location here in Germany, where also more than 50% of our loan book is, because we are benefiting now from the loan book here, from the structure of the loan book, but also obviously from the government support program.
Yeah. And you don't see, just briefly, you don't see a risk that there is a sort of cliff edge when some of the government programs will run out in terms, you know, for companies, and thus for the credit side.
So I mean, you cannot fully rule that out, but look, I'm you know, the last big financial crisis where we were kind of part of the problem, now we are part of the solution, and we should be the solution as a bank with the standing we have, with the capital, the balance sheet, all the pre-work we have done. But if you really compare 2008, 2009, when we also had then an economic recession in Europe, but also globally, if you compare the capital ratio, the liquidity, the working capital consumption of corporates to today, you also see that a lot of corporates in this world, also most of our clients actually improved the way they work with their working capital, they improve their capital position, they improve their liquidity position. So I think the resilience of a lot of our clients is even higher than 10 to 12 years ago. Then you have the unprecedented support programs from the central banks, because we are always talking about the right action of the government. And I think a lot of governments have taken the right steps. I have to applaud that what Germany has done. I'm very positive now on the European steps which have been initiated over the last 6 or 7 weeks. But that all work to contain this real pandemic only in conjunction with the central bank measures. And if you take these three items, government support programs, central bank measures, and the improvement of balance sheet of our clients, then I do think that there is a lot of resilience in the system. Do we see more defaults than last year? Of course. But is it controllable in a base case? Absolutely. And that is the base for our loan loss provision assumption for the year 2020.
Okay. Christian, let's turn to one of the dominating topics in the past few weeks in Germany, which is Wirecard. Deutsche Bank has said that it's willing to help Wirecard Bank. Can you just explain what kind of help you are thinking about in terms of Wirecard Bank?
Look, Daniel, also there, I know you will be disappointed, but I'm not prepared to give a lot of details. But one thing is clear. On purpose, last year, we formed the corporate bank. That is the heart of Deutsche Bank. That is why Deutsche Bank was found.
When your tenants have a burst pipe and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super plumber in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble locksmiths, glaziers, electricians and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to 1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me.
Stop on profit for British pound at 124.876.
To your local Curry's PC World.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Tuesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
I'm moving my stop on profit for British pound to 124.846.
That missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake or snack on us. Go on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details visit costa.co.uk/terms.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
What would the world be like if we listened more? At Honda,
Our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass. A self-balancing motorcycle. And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Huh. Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda, the power of dreams.
The revolving credit facility and even some very preliminary exploratory merger talks. You have got a very strong background in risk management within Deutsche Bank. How did your own view on Wirecard evolve in the past 1 or 2 years?
First of all, fortunately, we have a functioning governance, and that means that business and risk management are taking the decisions. And it would be awkward if the CEO is participating in each and every call. So I can only say that our people, in my view, have handled the situation very well. We have a very limited, and I just say it again, a very limited net exposure to Wirecard. There is no existing margin loan to any other thing anymore. So I'm actually very positive about the risk management. And of course, you have some outside-in views, but this is nothing to be discussed here. We have a functioning governance. We have a very experienced risk management, and I think Stuart and the business handled it very, very well.
Okay. I wanted to just briefly touch on the topic of M&A before we come to the question.
All right, so that was our bureau chief, Daniel Schaefer, trying his best to get something out of Deutsche Bank CEO Christian Sewing. I have to say, I find German CEOs are really good at being evasive. And for some reason, I'm not sure if it's a legal thing or if they just don't feel like giving up. And for some reason, I'm not sure if it's a legal thing or if they just don't feel like giving up the information. They just don't want to answer any questions.
Well, maybe it is genuinely too soon for him to say, what value is left in Wirecard. He is a bit too detached from that process, as he says. I did find he was a bit more candid on the expectations he now has for the Eurozone, given the recovery fund and what's been agreed there, or the German stimulus. He seemed genuinely quite impressed by all of that.
For sure. And that's interesting as well. But the Wirecard story is so front and center, Anna. And, Daniel asked him, what has been your view of Wirecard over the last 1 or 2 years, and how has that evolved? It is a national pastime, certainly for anybody in Germany that's anywhere near markets, to have a take on Wirecard. Everybody has a take.
He's saving it for a book.
Maybe, yes. maybe he's going to write a book later. But that when the Financial Times came out with this reporting that there were problems with the accounting, he definitely read the reports, and he had such a strong relationship with the company, and he had to make a call. Either the FT is wrong and they're just trying to sensationalize these issues, or no, this company is doing a lot of crazy things, and so many investigative journalists are figuring there's a lot of problems here. Where there's smoke, there's fire. He had to take one side or the other, even if only in his mind, and it would be great to know what that was.
One day, maybe he'll give us the answers to those thorny questions. Matt, the Wirecard share price, it moves a lot, doesn't it, daily? But it's down another 16%. I'm not sure it matters as much anymore, because it's worth a lot less than it was. But should we get a slightly fuller data check? We've got European equity markets down by 0.9% right now. The FTSE 100 and the Xetra DAX both down by more than 1%. In fact, the CAC 40 down by more than 1% as well. So things generally worsening just a touch as we go through the European session. US futures also on the back foot, down by between 0.5% and 1%. NASDAQ and the strong gains there, and tech stocks was the story of yesterday. Brent oil prices also drifting lower, down 0.8%. 0.3% in conjunction with the risk-off mood. And risk-off is picked up in the FX markets as well. We're down by 0.3% on the dollar index right now.
All right, so if you remember yesterday, we had the beginning of Emmanuel Macron's government reshuffle. We got a new prime minister, and now the French president has filled out his team a little bit more. Joining us to bring us up to speed on the new government in France is Caroline Conan in Paris. It's pretty new, Caroline, but there are some, Bruno Le Maire, for example, is still the finance minister.
Matt, you could actually argue that this is not a major reshuffle. This is not a major shift because Emmanuel Macron has actually kept the key heavyweights from the previous government, including, as you mentioned, Bruno Le Maire as economy and finance minister. Bruno Le Maire, who said this morning during the new ceremony to mark his reappointment, my roadmap is clear and simple: recovery, morning, noon, and night. So that's why probably he was kept in this key position. Macron also kept the foreign minister, health minister, defense minister, education minister. So as you can see, not so many changes. A few new names, though, that we can think about is Barbara Pompili, who will be in charge of the environment, something that is a key priority for Macron in this recovery. Éric Dupond-Moretti, a very well-known criminal defense lawyer who defended, for example, former trader Jérôme Kerviel, is becoming justice minister. And the interior minister, very close to Macron, is called Gérald Darmanin. Of course, he will also be key at a time when we had a lot of protests, including in France, against the police.
Jérôme Kerviel, that's a name from the past. A blast from the past, from the last crisis. Yeah, from the last crisis, Caroline. So, I mean, yeah, you could argue all that's really happened is a change in prime minister at the really sort of big jobs level. But in terms of, away from the reshuffling then, what steps is the new government expected to take then to rebuild the economy?
So the first step is a recovery plan that is expected by the end of the summer. So the French government is not going to have much time to go on holidays this year because that needs to be included in the 2021 budget in September. And of course, we've already seen some plans, for example, for the aerospace or the auto industry. But on top of that, the government has been helping companies, keeping staff by providing temporary unemployment benefits and various state loans guarantees. And this whole thing is costing nearly 500 billion euros to the French economy. So, of course, that's going to increase deficit, that's going to increase debt. Debt is expected to go above 120% of GDP by the end of the year. So this will be, of course, the priority for Bruno Le Maire.
Remember when I don't want to hijack this thread, Caroline, but remember when Kerviel walked from Rome to Paris?
Yeah, I was there actually, and I went to the border between Italy and France before he was arrested.
That's a strange posting, isn't it?
Got 3 years in jail for losing $5.6 billion. That's, I'd say, a pretty lenient sentence, I guess.
Caroline, thank you very much. Caroline Conan joining us from Paris with the latest on the French reshuffle.
All right, from Caroline Conan to Caroline Hepker, let's get your global news headlines. Caroline?
Good morning, Matt and Anna. Britain is going to pump £3 billion into environmental projects as part of its plan to protect jobs in the wake of the pandemic. Bloomberg's Sebastian Salek reports now on Rishi Sunak's latest spending plans.
The big numbers keep coming. Billions on fighting unemployment and reviving the arts industry, and now finding ways to make the green agenda part of the nation's recovery. The latest release from the Treasury includes about £1 billion to make public buildings more energy efficient. All this ahead of the Chancellor answering MPs' questions later today and his formal statement to Parliament on Wednesday. In London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has defended the national security legislation imposed on the city last week. Her comments come hours after her government asserted broad new powers. They include warrantless searches, online surveillance and property seizure in Hong Kong. Meanwhile, in Australia, the second most populous state has announced a 6-week lockdown across metropolitan Melbourne. That's as a coronavirus outbreak risks triggering a second wave of infections. From midnight on Wednesday, people must stay home except for work, essential services, medical treatment or school. The state recorded 191 new cases overnight, the biggest daily increase since the crisis began. And finally, in Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro has had another test for COVID-19 after showing symptoms. Let's hear now from Bolsonaro.
In my particular case, given my history of athleticism, if I was to be infected with the virus, I would not have to worry. I would not feel it. It would be like a little flu or like being under the weather.
The results will be available today from that test. According to CNN Brazil, the president is taking hydroxychloroquine. That's the medicine that's been claimed to combat the virus, but the World Health Organization has now dropped the drug from trials of effective treatments. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Caroline Hepker. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Caroline, thanks very much for that. Now, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to speak with John Normand. He is the head of cross-asset fundamental strategy at JP Morgan. We're going to get his outlook for the economic recovery and the key risks for the second half. Also, quick reminder, you can listen back to a selection of our interviews at BloombergRadio.com or on your Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen to us on either of those things as well. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
No company wants to be involved in an international dispute. But when disagreements arise, you need expertise at your side. Take a closer look at ICDR, the International Center for Dispute Resolution. Backed by the longevity and strength of the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of cross-border dispute resolution services, handling more cases than any other institution. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
President of the Jewish...
The big Volkswagen event is now on. If you're after a new Volkswagen, we offer to pay your first 3 months finance payments and an additional £500 to £1,000 contribution to your deposit at 3.8% APR representative. Hello, sir. Do any take your fancy?
Well, yes, a new Golf or T-Cross. A Tiguan. No, Passat. Oh, I need to sit down.
Here, have a seat.
The big Volkswagen event. With every type of car on offer, you may have trouble choosing. With Solutions Personal Contract Plan until 12th of July excludes e-Golf at participating retailers only. Minimum 46 months to receive 3 months finance payments. Indemnities may be required. Volkswagen Finance. Contact your local retailer to book an appointment.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this morning. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and see if that vacuum can take care of your well-trodden home. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake or snack on us. Go on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details visit costa.co.uk/terms.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Ever wondered how people's postcode lottery works? Easy. Your postcode is your ticket. And every weekday it gives you the chance to win £1,000 or £30,000 every weekend. And every month players in your postcode could win a share of £3 million. Join in at postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of July to play in the August draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones. And you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg QuickTake. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. European equity markets down by 1% on the Stock 600. The FTSE 100, the CAC 40 and the Xetra DAX all down by more than 1% right now. So things worsening as we go through the second hour of the European trading day. US futures also point to the downside. Remember, this time yesterday we were sitting on strong gains from China, and that moved on through to the US session with really strong gains for tech stocks on the Nasdaq. So perhaps just taking a little pause for breath after all of that euphoria, and European equity markets certainly moving downwards within that. We've got oil prices in conjunction with that move away from risk assets then also showing some weakness, just down 0.7% on Brent at 42.79. We see money going into fixed income on a day like this where we are risk off. You would expect to see that money going into fixed income, so yields come down. The yield on the US 10-year now at 0.66%. That is a little weaker than it was yesterday. The move into the dollar, of course, goes along with that risk-off vibe that we're seeing in markets. So the dollar is stronger by around 3 or 4% on the various dollar indexes that we track here at Bloomberg. The euro, in conjunction with that, then, is actually weaker, down around 0.3%. We also see the Australian dollar weaker, down by 0.6%. And we have seen the state of Victoria have to impose some localised restrictions, or restrictions on the Melbourne metro area, actually, so not so local, for Australia's second largest city. That in connection, of course, with the coronavirus outbreak. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Caroline Hepker with more on what's going on around the world.
Thanks so much, Anna. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has reshuffled his government. Bruno Le Maire is staying on as finance minister, and Jean-Yves Le Drian remains at foreign affairs. But in an effort to improve union relations, Macron has moved Elisabeth Borne to Labour and Social Affairs, and to work on delivering the green agenda, he's appointed Barbara Pompili as Minister for Ecological Transition. Meanwhile, US infectious diseases chief Anthony Fauci says that any coronavirus vaccine would be limited in how it would provide protection. He has told a video conference that health officials assume that a shot would offer a degree of protection, but it's likely to be finite. Fauci expects there will be an answer by early 2021 as to whether any of the more than 140 vaccines being developed now would be safe and effective. And finally, the coronavirus crisis is set to spark the biggest retreat for meat eating in decades. Per capita consumption is set to fall almost 3%, according to the data from the United Nations. There's a swirl of factors contributing to the change. The coronavirus economic fallout means that consumers are cutting down on grocery bills and eating out. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Caroline Hepker. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
I would love to be able to not eat meat. You know?
The urge, is that it?
Well, because the idea of it, I don't like, treating animals badly. Yes. And also, I do care, somewhat about the climate change issue and so on and so forth. I could stand to lose a few kilos.
But you just like burgers.
Yeah, I love. I honestly have eaten, I think, at literally every single burger joint in Berlin. I've been here for 3 years. I've now canvassed all of them, and I have my
Well, you said you're going for pizza later, so that is
pepperoni
easy to
lovers.
veggie.
I do pepperoni lovers, so it's just piled.
The thing that I find weird, though, is that from this report, I learned that actually most people go out to restaurants and eat meat, and that's why the coronavirus has helped to decrease the amount of meat being eaten. But I must say, I'm the sort of person that makes a steak at home or in the back garden barbecuing meat. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting point.
No, when I'm at home, it's cereal. especially
10 times a day.
When the wife's away, I just stock up. I have like 10 boxes of cereal and just 4 liters of milk, and that's all I can make. Let's get over to Nathan Hager and see what Nathan. What do you eat on the reg?
It's all cereal this morning. But it's interesting throughout this pandemic. It's almost become like eating out, or at least patronizing your local restaurant has almost become a civic duty, right?
Yes.
To try to help keep the economy afloat somewhat. I always think sort of been thinking about that a little bit, and burger sounds pretty good later. Little too early for that this morning.
It's never too early for a burger, dude. Bacon cheeseburger, medium medium rare. Sorry, what was I saying? Medium rare.
Oh, yeah, don't do that.
Nathan, what have you got coming up on your
we're looking a little bit at
program
this morning, Matt. After the rally that started the week off yesterday, especially on the tech side, looks like things are on pause a bit this morning. But, of course, the coronavirus certainly is not. Infections continue to climb in this country, and some of the hardest-hit hotspots are dialing back their reopenings, putting more pressure on policymakers to act on another round of stimulus after they get back from their holiday. They're off for another week or so. But we're going to look at what all this means for markets with Jeffrey Yu at BNY Mellon, as well as Sam Stovall of CFRA. They're going to be with us this morning. We're also going to talk with Bloomberg Politics editor Kathleen Hunter about what the coronavirus response in this country is doing to our standing on the global stage. It's all coming up with me and Karen Moscow getting ready for breakfast on Bloomberg Daybreak.
So, you know why? I'm excited for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
I love Sam Stovall.
Yeah.
The guy is a walking markets encyclopedia. I'm pretty sure he has written down, S&P movements for like the last 50 years by hand. Oh, yeah. So, and he remembers everything. So that guy is awesome. And then I have to say, and I don't want to offend anybody else, but Kathleen Hunter is my favorite politics reporter at Bloomberg.
Yeah.
Let's hope
she's
she is listening.
A font of information.
Yeah, absolutely. So very cool show. Looking forward to it coming up with Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow. And if you're listening on Sirius XM, you'll hear that. If you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll also hear a worthy program, right? Because Tom Keene is coming on a Francine Lacroix.
Mm-hmm. Right here in this hour, we still have time for our last guest, Matt. Our next guest says that he sees 5 key risks to manage in the second half of the year, including a second wave of coronavirus, a mini fiscal cliff in the US if Congress fails to extend stimulus measures, and a step up in US-China tensions related to Hong Kong. That's just 3 of the 5. Let's get to John Normand, head of cross-asset fundamental strategy at JP Morgan. There's a lot to manage going into the second half of this year then, John. I mean, if we start with the virus, what are you watching for specifically to tell you whether it's onwards and upwards here for risk assets in the second half or whether they take a pause downwards?
The 2 things I'm watching, one is whether or not governments are actually reinstating lockdowns as opposed to just stalling the reopening of the economies. And the second is whether some of the data on confidence and spending start to buckle, even if there are no reinstatements of lockdowns. So one is sort of the policy-driven effect of the virus on growth and markets, and the other is the indirect effect if spending retrenches even without new restrictions being imposed. So far, we're not seeing evidence of either of those to a broad degree. We're seeing it in some municipalities, but not on a broad level yet.
How important is it that this thing is kept in check? Because Americans, to some extent, Americans are, I think, more able than Europeans to just go about their daily business and not mind so much if, when you have these kinds of disasters, or they get over it quickly and continue back to business as usual. It's just kind of like the spirit of the Wild West. Is the coronavirus different?
Well, I think the coronavirus is a constraint. It's a ceiling on the amount of activity that can be achieved. You're right. There is an adaptability to people, not just Americans because of their Wild West heritage or can-do spirit or the mythical can-do spirit, but in many countries there's a way to sort of shift consumption or production to a digital form. So it's not as if there will be no activity for as long as this virus exists. It's just that there's a limit on how much can be achieved. And I think that's the big point here is that, when there are limits on growth, there are going to be limits on profits. When there are limits on profits, there are limits on asset valuation. So it's not really about having to revisit any kind of lows in asset prices just because the virus resurfaces. It's more about kind of scaling back the upside on the economies and markets.
John, do the US-China tensions, do they really manifest themselves in markets in the second half of this year? Because we've had plenty of tension up to this point, but not all of it's been reflected. We've been focused on other things.
I think it depends on the nature of the U.S.-China or the U.S. aggression towards China. It seems to be a unilateral process at this stage, meaning whatever the Trump administration announces is not responded to by the Chinese administration. And if you think the U.S. administration is going to continue sanctioning individuals in China or Hong Kong, I don't believe this is a market issue. If the U.S. is sanctioning financial institutions or large corporates in China or Hong Kong, I think that becomes more of a market issue. So the channel by which the U.S. decides to confront China is important. So far, the channels have been fairly limited.
All right, John, great to get a little bit of insight with you, and I know you're going to go on Bloomberg Surveillance next. So our listeners, I'll just tell our listeners who are tuned in London on DAB Digital Radio, don't touch that dial. Bloomberg Surveillance is coming up, and you'll hear more from John Normand when he talks with Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix. If you're anywhere else in the world, certainly if you're in the U.S., you're going to hear Bloomberg Daybreak with Nathan Hager. Difficult decision because he has Sam Stovall on, who is awesome to listen to. But if you want to hear more from John, just turn on Bloomberg TV.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this morning. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and see if that 55-inch TV is perfect for the return of sport. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Tuesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
If you have to drive, then it's more important than ever to watch your speed. As London starts to reopen, there are going to be more people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Tuesday, July 7th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks slump after yesterday's rally.
Coronavirus cases climb in the South while warning signs emerge in New Jersey.
Dr. Anthony Fauci warns on the long-term effectiveness of a vaccine.
And Washington prepares for work on another round of stimulus.
Governor Cuomo says New York is holding its own in controlling COVID-19. Plus, the white woman who called the NYPD on a black bird watcher has been charged. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Mets and Yankees schedules are out, and there's a new highest-paid player in the NFL.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting Witham.com.
And U.S. futures are falling after yesterday's rally. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 25 points. Dow futures down 265. NASDAQ futures down 48. The DAX in Germany is down 1 1/3%. 10-year Treasury of 3/32 yield 0.66%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. And NYMEX crude oil is down 0.9% or 35 cents at $40.28 a barrel. This data check brought to you by SEI. Today's competitive marketplace requires asset managers to become more operationally adept. See how you can transform your business with SEI's global platform at SEIC.com/IMS. Nathan.
Karen, coronavirus infections across the country continue to climb. State and local officials continue to clash over what measures to take. In Florida, Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez is rolling back reopening plans, closing restaurants and gyms.
What we need is a plan and a strategy that is long-term and that is calculated to defeat COVID-19 in our community.
At the same time, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is reassuring residents there's little to fear from the outbreak.
There's no need to really be fearful about it. I mean, we can talk about the different steps that individuals can take, that we're going to take statewide. But at the end of the day, this is something that's been around for quite some time.
The latest data show Florida cases hitting a record on a rolling 7-day basis.
In California, the rate of infections continues to climb, yet plans for a slow reopening continue. Here at the latest is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
The governor says positivity rates continue to grow quickly.
We were at 4.9% positivity rate just 14 days ago, and now again it's 6.8%. You look at the 7-day positivity rate, it's now over 7%.
And he says hospitalization is up 50% over the 14-day average. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Ed. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy's growing concerned about a climbing transmission rate.
For every new case of COVID we are seeing, that case is leading to at least one other new case. This means increasing rate of spread statewide. This is an early warning sign that, quite frankly, we need to do more.
Murphy says infections brought from other states helped drive New Jersey's transmission rate to the highest level in 10 weeks. The state has a mandatory self-quarantine in place for travelers from 16 states.
Any vaccine to ward off the virus could be limited in how long it protects against infection. That's according to Dr. Anthony Fauci.
We're going to assume that there's a degree of protection, but we have to assume that it's going to be finite. It's not going to be like a measles vaccine. So there's going to be follow-up in those cases to see if we might need a boost.
Fauci says initial vaccine should be enough to get us through the first cycle of the virus. He still expects word on the viability of a shot by year's end.
For lawmakers in Washington, the question is how to keep the economy afloat as we wait for a vaccine. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with more on that. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. The fight against COVID-19 promises to drag on, and that reality is setting in for the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
We had hoped we'd be on the way to saying goodbye to this healthcare pandemic. Clearly, it is not over.
McConnell expects Congress to pass one final coronavirus rescue bill later this month. Meantime, the Labor Secretary, Eugene Scalia, pins hopes for a quick recovery on states reopening despite rising cases. He spoke on Bloomberg's Balance of Power.
We can continue to safely reopen as long as we're careful. And again, as long as we bear in mind the lesson that we've observed in California, Arizona, and elsewhere.
Scalia tells us there are no plans to extend unemployment benefits beyond their current scope. He expects extra $600 a week benefits to expire at the end of this month as scheduled. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Global stocks are lower after yesterday's rally. Chinese equities were the lone bright spot in Asia overnight. And Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. The CSI 300 held on to 5-year highs, up another 0.6% on the close, while the Shanghai Composite had a more modest gain of 0.4%, rising for a sixth session. The offshore yuan briefly strengthened through the 7 per dollar level for the first time since March. Elsewhere, equity markets fell in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong and Singapore. In Singapore, Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Juliet. Tensions are rising in Hong Kong as police are given sweeping new powers under China's new national security law. We get details from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis.
Police can now search a premises without a warrant issued by a judge. They can conduct online surveillance and seize electronic devices. Officers can freeze assets and seize property if the security minister says it's warranted. And they can take your travel documents and prevent you from leaving Hong Kong. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calls it Orwellian censorship. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Brian, thank you. On the corporate front, we have earnings from Samsung. Profits beat estimates thanks to increased chip demand. Gadget sales also showed signs of recovering. The strong results from Samsung suggest the tech industry could be climbing back from the pandemic.
Bayer, known as Bayer in the U.S., has seen its Roundup settlement hit a roadblock. A federal judge asked to oversee the lawsuits has tentatively rejected the proposal. He's calling for a court hearing later this month. Shares of Bayer are down more than 6% in Frankfurt.
And S&P futures down 28 points this morning. Dow futures down 298 and NASDAQ futures down 55. The euro is at 1.1265 against the dollar. British pound 1.2469. And the yen is at 107.70. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 5:07 on Wall Street. Let's get more on the coronavirus response in this country and the rest of the world's news. Here's Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the state is holding its own in controlling the coronavirus. Cuomo says in the 7-week stretch since the start of reopening the state, we're actually down from where we were since the beginning. As for New York City, Cuomo urged residents to remain vigilant.
New Yorkers did the impossible. We went from the worst infection rate in the United States to the best infection rate in the United States. I like to say that we crossed the mountain.
New York City entered Phase 3 of reopening yesterday. Westchester and Hudson Valley enter Phase 4 today. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy talked about his plans for reopening the state.
Summer camp and educational programs for our youth have been green-lighted to reopen. Outdoor graduations may be held to celebrate the class of 2020, and NJ Transit returned to its full weekday schedule. We are continuing down our road back.
Governor Ned Lamont says Connecticut will delay phase 3 of its reopening indefinitely to avoid the COVID-19 resurgences other states are seeing. Connecticut was set to begin phase 3 on July 20th. Atlanta's mayor says she has tested positive for COVID-19 despite having what she describes as no symptoms. Keisha Lance Bottom says her symptoms were more like seasonal allergies. The 50-year-old Democrat is among the women named as a potential running mate for presumptive presidential nominee Joe Biden. A white woman who called the police on a black man watching birds in Central Park in May has been charged with falsely reporting an incident, a misdemeanor. Amy Cooper had accused Christian Cooper of threatening to attack her after he asked her to keep her dog on a leash. Cooper is scheduled to appear for an arraignment in October. She faces up to a year in jail and probation. Jeffrey Epstein's longtime confidant, Ghislaine Maxwell, has been transferred from a New England jail to Brooklyn to face charges she recruited girls for him to sexually abuse. The 58-year-old was arrested last week. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Here's John Stashower.
All right, Nathan, move over Mike Trout. His contract with the Angels is for a mere $425 million guaranteed. Patrick Mahomes' new 10-year extension with the Chiefs is for $477 million. He could make $503 million. That's over $500 million, although in the NFL it's no sure thing. Mahomes is still playing in Kansas City when the deal ends in 2031. The contract is staggering. Mahomes is only 24 years old. He sat on the bench as a rookie and then won an MVP. And then won a Super Bowl. It had already been widely reported the Yankees' first game would be July 23rd in Washington. Now the entire schedule is out after those 3 games in D.C. The Yanks move up to Philadelphia for 2, and then they will host the Phillies for 2. As for Subway Series games that you cannot take a subway in 10, Yanks and Mets starting August 21st at Citi Field and a week later in the Bronx. The Mets opener July 24th at home against Atlanta. At least that's the plan. The Dodgers' Mookie Betts and the Cardinals' Andrew Miller have both publicly stated they have doubts still as to whether there's really going to be a season. Atlanta outfielder Nick Markakis is the latest player to opt out. And 3 teams, the Nationals, Astros, and Cardinals, had to cancel their workouts yesterday because they had not yet gotten back results of COVID tests that were taken last Friday. Widely reported that Stanley Cup playoff games will be held in Toronto and Edmonton, and now word that the Cup Final Series will be in Edmonton. Next week's PGA event, the Memorial in Ohio, was to be the first to allow in fans, but with the virus surging, they've changed their mind. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
And, John, there doesn't seem to be much love for tennis as colleges look for ways to trim their athletic budgets due to the pandemic. According to the Associated Press, tennis programs are the only sports to be eliminated by more than 4 Division I schools since the outbreak began. The head of the Intercollegiate Tennis Association says many of those cuts may have already been in the works, and it may have been easier to make them now when people are more focused on the virus. S&P futures down 29 points now. Dow futures lower by 301. NASDAQ futures giving back 54 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our #1 priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this morning. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and talk laptops and washing machines or fridges and TVs. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones. And you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Here's Carolyn Hyde.
Let's stick with some of the deals as well that we've seen. Uber's latest deal. Scott Kessler of Third Bridge is with us. Scott, I want to start off by talking about a little bit of M&A to kick off this Monday, because we did get an exit from Postmates, not the public exit that perhaps it might have once upon a time looked for, but it's being bought up by Uber. How does it help the food delivery part of the business for Uber?
So, look, this is a deal that I think people were possibly thinking about. We saw some consolidation in this category announced relatively recently when JustEatTakeaway.com announced its pending purchase of Grubhub. There was chatter that Uber was also interested in Grubhub. So I think a lot of people were probably thinking that Uber was looking to make a move. And when you look at Uber Eats, you know, according to data from Second Measure, at least as of May, they had a little bit over 20% share in the U.S. Postmates had 8%. So that would essentially get them to the clear number 2 business in the category behind only DoorDash. And it would put them ahead relatively clearly of Grubhub.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are dropping from a one-month high after Germany reported weaker than expected industrial data. U.S. stock index futures are lower a day after tech gains pushed the Nasdaq Composite to a record high. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 27 points. Dow futures down 283. Nasdaq futures down 50. The DAX in Germany is down 1 1/3%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 0.66%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1 1/3% or 54 cents at $40.09 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.5% or $9.30 at $17.84.10 an ounce. The euro 1.1267 against the dollar. British pound 1.2468 and the yen 107.73. And today we're watching for the jobs report at 10 o'clock Wall Street time. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. the U.S. death rate from COVID-19 has surpassed 130,000. Bloomberg's John Tucker has more in this live report.
And, Michael, infection rates across the country are climbing. Florida cases hit a new high on a rolling 7-day basis. Still, Governor Ron DeSantis there is reassuring residents there's little to fear from the outbreak, and that's leading to a clash with local officials. Miami-Dade's mayor is rolling back reopening plans. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy says infections brought from other states helped drive New Jersey's coronavirus transmission rate to the highest level in 10 weeks. And in California, the rate of positive infections continues to climb as plans for a slow reopening continue. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
John, thank you, sir. Companies associated with President Trump and members of his administration were among recipients of small business COVID loans. According to newly released data, loan recipients included a law firm run by one of Trump's key defenders in the Russia probe and a Kushner family real estate project. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. It's 5:19 on Wall Street now, and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. Jeffrey Yu joins us now, senior strategist at BNY Mellon. Good to have you with us, Jeffrey, as we watch a bit of a pullback after yesterday's rally to start off the week. I wonder if you see any further upside for equities.
Well, at this point, equities will just be looking at not only the situation with COVID in the U.S. but a global reflation. It's worth noting that probably contrary to expectations, this week's Monday risk surge was driven by China and what China can actually do to reflate its economy and whether the strong surge in Chinese markets is actually going to be backed up by hard data. The scale of the surge set really a high bar. So I think it's only natural that right now markets globally are just taking a bit of a breather, even if you look at the Chinese news reports. They're calling the temperature just a little bit too hot with equity markets right now, but fundamentals are still sound.
Fundamentals are sound. What fundamentals are you looking at?
Well, so if you look at Asia, we really need to take individual economies into isolation. On a global basis, I would say, yes, we are seeing greater signs of recovery. If you look at, China, the economy has opened up, for a while. You're looking from sectoral data, to just broader macro data. Things are picking up in the UK and Europe, for example. You're seeing spending pick up. In the US, we've had good jobs numbers. So those fundamentals, if they can be maintained, then that can actually help risk appetite. But again, it's just a question of good data right now. How long can we extend that? Can we actually make this recovery sustainable?
Of course, we got that worse than expected data on industrials out of Germany. What implications could that have for the market going forward?
I think, right now, if European data is still soft or subdued, actually markets will see whether that can be converted into a new push, new momentum to actually get the fiscal package in place. And we know there's going to be a critical summit coming through in Europe. There's still quite a bit of daylight between the frugal side versus the economies in the south, which actually require greater investment. I think from Chancellor Merkel's point of view, she would just say, look at the data in Germany. Germany can't reflate, but Germany can help everyone else invest and get the Eurozone data back up and running again. So bad data right now in Europe, that just underscores the need for a big push. So it actually might turn out to be good news.
What about the implications of the positive data we've seen out of the U.S. of late for a fiscal stimulus in the U.S. as talks start to get underway on that?
That really is an interesting point. So you can look at it in both ways. Now, I guess if the data is going to be sustainable, then that actually does reduce the need for additional stimulus. On the other hand, if there are concerns that the renewed lockdowns in certain states that could actually drive data softer again, then fiscal is still going to be on the table. I think the wider consensus, the broad consensus across global central banks right now is they can set the monetary conditions loose, but fiscal needs to generate the demand. So I think net, the fiscal discussion needs to actually move towards more, not a sudden cliff edge, taking it away, but whether that actually materializes really is going to be dependent on individual countries.
Also curious, Jeffrey, to get your view on how earnings could impact the stock market as we get closer to earnings season. Do you think we'll get sort of a lineup for earnings versus valuations anytime soon?
I think even before we go there, the people crunching the numbers, looking at valuations, will just have to look at guidance, right? So it was really, really tough, not just for companies, but for central banks. How many central banks suspended their staff and projections? The Fed did so during the last quarter. So that is the first step. That is the fundamental block for us to get even like solid numbers or half solid numbers on the table. So before we can actually start to talk about a medium to longer term view. So the companies in a position to provide stronger guidance, I think that will benefit as well from clarity, because markets want clarity right now. But again, everything's up in the air. Australia, for example, they thought they had navigated things quite well, but now Victoria's back into lockdown. So yes, maybe more clarity, but the path is still going to be very, very, very uncertain, and that probably will need to be applied to valuations as well.
All right. Thanks for this. As always, Jeffrey, good talking with you. That's Jeffrey Yu, Senior Strategist at BNY Mellon. As we look at a bit of a pullback for equities as we get this Tuesday morning started, S&P futures are down now by 29 points. Dow futures lower by 301 points. NASDAQ futures a loss of 54 points. DAX in Germany down almost 1.5%. The CAC in Paris is lower by 1.25% right now. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds. The yield at 0.66%. Yield on a 2-year Treasury note 0.15%. Stay with us. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The global stock rally hit the pause button today after German economic data came in lower than projected, underscoring the challenges as the region emerges from pandemic-related lockdowns. But stocks jumped higher to start the week with technology in the lead. Dow rose 460 points. The S&P was up 50. The NASDAQ jumped 226. A new report shines a light on the surging number of commercial bankruptcies as the coronavirus pandemic shut down the economy. Epic Systems, which makes bankruptcy software, says Chapter 11 filings spiked 26% year over year in the first half of 2020. That translated into more than 3,600 cases, or about 750 more than a year ago. Among the latest, 24-Hour Fitness, General Nutrition, and Chuck E. Cheese. Today we'll watch for the latest update on job openings and labor turnover. That report is due a half hour after the opening bell. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who sees change to launch new strategies.
The big Volkswagen event is now on. If you're after an approved used Volkswagen, for a limited time, you can buy one with 2 years warranty, 2 years MOT cover, 2 years roadside assistance, and 2 services all included at 8.9% APR representative. Hello, sir. Do any take your fancy?
I need to sit down. The big Volkswagen event. With every type of car on offer, you may have trouble choosing. With Solutions Personal Contract Plan until 12th of July. At participating retailers on used Volkswagens aged between 90 days and 60 months only. Indemnities may be required. Warranty valid for vehicles up to 100,000 miles at activation. MOT cover is up to 2 years and is underwritten by UK General Insurance Limited. Volkswagen Finance. Contact your local retailer.
When your tenants have an overflowing block sink and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super drainage engineer in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble plumbers, locksmiths, glaziers and electricians. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to 1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just Just the news you needed this morning. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that laptop can help you improve your home setup. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rocked that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most.
Hi, Mum.
From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond. With social distancing built in, there's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Global stocks are lower after yesterday's rally. Coronavirus cases continue to rise across the country. In Florida, Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez is backtracking on reopening plans.
The rollback includes gyms, large venues, casinos, and Airbnbs.
The mayor's also closing restaurants after data show Florida infections hitting a record on a rolling 7-day basis.
Dr. Anthony Fauci pins the surge in southern cases to early reopening plans.
With various states and cities trying to open up in the sense of getting back to some form of normality has led to a situation where we've now had record-breaking cases.
Across the country, daily infections are up 2%. That is an increase over last week's average.
Still, there's no call from the White House to halt reopening plans. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the latest. John, good morning.
And Karen, the administration is pinning hopes for a quick recovery on states reopening. Despite the rising cases, Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia says precautions are necessary.
We still need to practice social distancing. When that's not possible, quite often we're going to need to wear masks, and that's being reinforced.
When it comes to economic measures, Scalia tells us there are no plans to extend unemployment benefits beyond their current scope. He expects extra $600 a week benefits to expire at the end of this month as scheduled. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Okay, John, thanks. On the corporate front, we have earnings from Samsung. Profits beat estimates thanks to increased chip demand. Gadget sales also showed signs of recovering. The strong results from Samsung suggest the tech industry could be climbing back from the pandemic.
Bayer, known as Bayer in the U.S., has seen its Roundup settlement hit a roadblock. A federal judge asked to oversee the lawsuit.
Okay, I'm moving my stop on profit for British pound to 124.79.6. So stop on profit for British pound at 124.79.6.
6%, the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil's down 1.4% on 58 cents at $40.05 a barrel. COMEX gold is also moving lower this morning. It's down 0.6%, down $9.80 at $1,783.70 an ounce. The euro 1.1267 against the dollar. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:33 on Wall Street. Now with more on the coronavirus impact in this country and what else is happening around the world, here's Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Phase 4 of reopening begins today in New York's Westchester and Rockland counties. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the state is holding its own in controlling the coronavirus. Cuomo says in the 7-week stretch since the start of reopening the state, we're actually down from where we were since the beginning. The governor also says President Trump must admit COVID-19 is a major problem if he doesn't want to be a, quote, co-conspirator of the deadly virus.
If he does not acknowledge that, then he is facilitating the virus. He is enabling the virus. How did this become a political statement?
In New Jersey, summer youth camps will reopen. Governor Phil Murphy also says outdoor graduations can be held for the class of 2020. Murphy once again stressed the importance of wearing face masks.
We all need to be wearing face coverings, even when it's a hot day like today. COVID-19 doesn't care about the weather. It only cares about finding another person to infect. Don't be a willing host. Wear a face covering. Self-quarantine if you've been to a coronavirus hotspot, and get tested.
Governor Ned Lamont says Connecticut will delay phase 3 of its reopening indefinitely to avoid the COVID-19 resurgences other states are seeing. Connecticut was set to begin phase 3 on July 20th. Atlanta's mayor says she has tested positive for COVID-19 despite having what she describes as no symptoms. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms.
My symptoms have been like my seasonal allergy symptoms. I've had a headache the past few days and just, a little dry cough, but that's not unusual because I have that with my allergies, which are just about year-round in Atlanta.
The 50-year-old Democrat is among the women named as a potential running mate for presumptive presidential nominee Joe Biden. A white woman walking her dog who called the police during a viral dispute with a black man in Central Park was charged with filing a false report. In May, Amy Cooper called 911 to report she was being threatened by an African-American man when birdwatcher Christian Cooper appeared to keep his distance as he recorded her rant on his phone. The publisher of a tell-all book about President Donald Trump by his niece will be released next week. Simon & Schuster's announcement means the book by Mary Trump will be available for readers on July 14th, 2 weeks earlier than planned. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's 5:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Here's John Stashauer.
Thanks, Nathan. Normally when a baseball schedule comes out, a fan might want to then think about what games to attend. Not the case this year, but the schedule for games without fans is out, and as had been reported, the first game of the season, about 4 months late. 2 weeks from Thursday, the Yankees in Washington against the defending World Series champs in what should be a great pitching matchup of Garrett Cole in his Yankees debut against Max Scherzer. The Mets open up the next night at home against Atlanta. Mets and Yankees will face off over consecutive weekends in late August, first at Citi Field, then in the Bronx. Patrick Mahomes has already thrown 50 touchdown passes and won an MVP, and then won the first Super Bowl for Kansas City in 50 years, and now he's the highest paid player in the NFL, the highest in any sport. 10-year extension with the Chiefs, $477 million guaranteed, plus a no-trade clause. They didn't have to do this. Mahomes had 2 years left on his rookie contract. Jets safety Jamal Adams came in the same year as Mahomes. He's been looking for a new deal. The Jets seem in no hurry. The NBA is allowing players to use social justice messages on their uniforms. They provided a list of permissible messages. The Celtics' Jaylen Brown called the list disappointing. The opt-outs continue. Atlanta Braves outfielder Nick Markakis taking a pass on playing this season. Washington Wizards all-star Bradley Beal says he will travel with the team to Orlando today, but still hasn't decided whether he's going to actually play the games. And the Dallas MLS team, with 10 players having tested positive, will not take part in the MLS is Back tournament that starts Thursday in Orlando. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
Thanks, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
The pandemic is upending the rules of real estate in New York City. As residents avoid face-to-face lobby encounters to socially distance, some homebuyers see doormen as a liability. Ground floor apartments, typically shunned for their proximity to the street, are suddenly having their moment. Well, after fleeing New York for their second homes, some of the wealthiest families in the country are paying to reserve spots in the city's elite schools. One Upper East Side mom tells Bloomberg she paid full tuition to Manhattan private schools while also enrolling her kids in private school 2,000 miles away out west, where the family is currently staying. Princeton plans to bring back a portion of undergraduate students for the upcoming semester with regular COVID-19 testing in private sleeping areas. The school's approved a 10% tuition discount for all students for the 2020-2021 academic year. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
All right, Ed, thanks. 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and for WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that thousands of U.S. farms received just over $6 billion from the Payroll Protection Program.
I'm Steve Potusk, and on 1010 Wins in New York, we're watching shares of Becton Dickinson, which jumped yesterday after approval of its 15-minute COVID-19 test.
I'm Caroline Hepcombe, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on a new pledge by Chancellor Rishi Sunak to spend billions of pounds on green projects.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WIOD in Miami, I'm reporting Carnival Cruise Line will delay the launch of its new Mardi Gras ship.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting an appeals court has ruled the CEOs of GM and Fiat Chrysler don't have to meet to settle a lawsuit.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. And speaking of cars, Tesla's been on a roll. In just 5 trading days, the electric car maker's market cap has added the combined value of Detroit's Big Three. Tesla's grown by an average $14 billion on each of those days. Analysts say institutional investors now want a piece of that company. It's 5:40 on Wall Street. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is online now. It's the heist issue, including the empty frames that remain the art world's biggest mystery. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. Listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio, or watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device at youtube.com. Search Bloomberg Global News. S&P futures down 28 points. Dow futures lower by 281. NASDAQ futures a loss of 50 points. This is Bloomberg.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Noel Spiegel, former senior partner with Deloitte & Touche and past JCF president, discusses the advantages of a donor-advised fund over a private foundation.
There's a lot involved in having a private foundation. You need to engage attorneys, you need to engage accountants, file tax returns. At JCF, all of that is done for you. You don't have to get involved in anything other than making your contribution to your fund and then determining which grants that you want to make.
A JCF fund may be opened with a minimum $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to or together with a private foundation.
If you have a foundation, you have to list all of the contributions that you made. Potentially anybody, because the information is public, can find out exactly which organizations a foundation has made charitable contributions to.
Let JCF simplify your philanthropy and protect your privacy. Learn more about JCF's private client group at jcfny.org.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. The number of people...
Prepare your child for the world ahead with Blundell School, Devon.
an independent day and boarding school for 3 to 18-year-olds.
Every day is a different adventure.
Set in 100 idyllic acres amid the rolling hills of Devon, Blundell's can be a crucial part of the equation if you're considering a move to the southwest.
We looked at schools right away across from Salisbury, and Blundell's punches well above its weight. Exeter down the road.
We're proud to offer an outstanding, quality education, less than 2 hours by direct train to central London.
The happy teachers bring the lessons to life.
Blundell's, one of Devon and Cornwall's most prestigious schools for more than 400 years. Rated excellent by the ISI. Learn more at blundels.org.
The big Volkswagen event is now on. If you're after an approved used Volkswagen, for a limited time, you can buy one with 2 years warranty, 2 years MOT cover, 2 years roadside assistance, and 2 services all included at 8.9% APR representative. Hello, sir. Do any take your fancy?
I need to sit down.
The big Volkswagen event. With every type of car on offer, you may have trouble choosing. With Solutions Personal Contract Plan until 12th of July. At participating retailers on used Volkswagens aged between 90 days and 60 months only. Indemnities may be required. Warranty valid for vehicles up to 100,000 miles at activation. MOT cover is up to 2 years and is underwritten by UK General Insurance Limited. Volkswagen Finance. Contact your local retailer.
When your tenants have a burst pipe and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super plumber in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble locksmiths, glaziers, electricians and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to 1,500 per call-out. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Today, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update. In the U.S., over 130,000 people have died from coronavirus. People without symptoms may be responsible for most of what's now spreading around the nation.
COVID-19 cases keep climbing in the U.S.
This is a public health crisis for our nation.
Dr. Peter Hotez with the Baylor College of Medicine says the country isn't moving in the right direction.
We're soon going to get to the point where everybody in the United States knows someone personally who's very sick with COVID-19. That is going to have an incredibly destabilizing effect on the country.
I'm John Lawrence.
Atlanta's mayor says she's tested positive for COVID-19 despite having what she describes as no symptoms. Keisha Lance Bottoms is among the women named as a potential vice presidential running mate for presumptive nominee Joe Biden. The Senate's oldest Republican, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, says he'll not attend the 2020 Republican convention because of coronavirus concerns. I'm John Trout.
It's a new disease making an unprecedented impact.
The job losses were widespread.
It is a stunningly historic moment. Your best strategy?
Is this a market that's accepted reality?
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are dropping from a one-month high as officials warn the economy will take longer to recover, and Germany reported weaker than expected industrial data. U.S. stock index futures are lower a day after tech gains pushed the NASDAQ composite to a record. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down about 30 points. Dow futures down 293. NASDAQ futures down 50. The DAX in Germany is down 1 1/3%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds. Yield 0.66%. Yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1 1/3% or 54 cents at $40.09 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.6% or $10.70 at $17.82.90 an ounce. The euro 1.1265 against the dollar. British pound 1.2470. And the yen 107.78. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Dr. Anthony Fauci says any vaccine developed to ward off COVID-19 would likely be limited in how long it would shield against infection. The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases says we're still knee-deep in the first wave of the pandemic. More than 130,000 people in the U.S. have died from the virus. Companies Companies associated with President Trump and members of his administration were among recipients of coronavirus aid. According to newly released data, loan recipients included a law firm run by one of Trump's key defenders in the Russia probe, a Kushner family real estate project, and the publisher of the National Enquirer. President Trump said he opposes renaming the Washington Redskins and Cleveland Indians, dismissing as politically correct efforts to change what many view as offensive references to Native Americans. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John.
And Michael, thank you. 5:49 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm John Tucker. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. As economies reopen and employers consider ways of getting people back to work, some companies are looking at antibody testing. Does it work? Bloomberg's Stephanie Baker has some experience with this as she joins us from London this morning. Steph, you write for Bloomberg Business Week. You've had more than a few tests. Walk us through your experience, if you would.
Right. So I had an illness in February and was never tested for COVID-19. This was early days when testing was hard to come by. So I was curious to find out if I did, in fact, have it. In April, I took 4 antibody tests, these finger prick cassettes that were on the market at the time. And many had questioned whether or not they were reliable. And I took 2 that were positive and 2 that were negative. So I was none the wiser. It was a very frustrating experience. I waited until some newer tests came on the market that seemed to be more reliable, and took a test by Abbott, the U.S. pharma giant, where instead of taking a finger prick blood sample, they took it from your vein, which is considered more reliable, potentially more sensitive, and that indeed was positive. So that was my 5th antibody test to determine whether or not I had it. Now, these tests are not perfect, right? You know, we don't know how long antibodies to COVID-19 last and what kind of immunity they confer, but at least gives me some sense of where I stand, that I might have some immunity, and it's something to monitor.
Well, what's the difference between the swab test and one where the blood is drawn? Is one better than the other?
The swab test is to test for an active infection.
Okay.
The blood tests are to see if you have recovered from COVID-19 and you have the antibodies, the sort of immune fighting system in place to prevent reinfection.
Now,
and I will stress that we still don't know what it looks like in terms of how long antibodies last and whether or not you could get reinfected.
All right, what good is the antibody test if, as you just said, we don't know how much or to the extent to which that infers some sort of immunity?
Well, we think many scientists believe it confers some immunity, at the very least for a few months, possibly for a couple of years. There was research done with the outbreak of the first SARS in 2002 and 2003, and they found that antibodies against that SARS outbreak lasted for 2 years. And, you know, I'm curious, you know, there are some people who want to know for the sake of, you know, in case they have lung or heart conditions in the future, and that, you know, the case of COVID-19 might, you know, be a factor that your doctor might incorporate into your treatment. And, you know, we will learn more about COVID-19 antibodies as it progresses. And as long as there is no vaccine, I think it's better to know than to not know, but while being careful at the same time.
You make this revelation as part of a public health awareness campaign. It's a public service on your part, but do you feel a little bit like Nathaniel Hawthorne's character, Hester Prynne? Is there a letter attached somewhere?
Well, it's a weird experience because usually you don't want to be diagnosed with a disease. And in this case, I was rather happy to get a positive result because, you know, perhaps, depending on what we find out in the future, perhaps I will not get it again. So in this case, having if you want to call it a scarlet letter, is not a bad thing. But I do think that we all need to be careful about what immunity might allow you to do and what it might not allow you to do. So I think I'm trying to be as careful and responsible as I can with this decision. And I think that's the reason why a lot of companies are reluctant to do antibody testing, is because we don't really know what it means. It's good to know. It provides peace of mind in an anxious time. But it's a kind of watch this space.
We are glad you're okay. Steph, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Bloomberg's Stephanie Baker. You could read her story in the next edition of Bloomberg Business Week. Karen.
All right, John Tucker, thank you. It is 5:54 on Wall Street. It's time now for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Minor league baseball teams are suing their insurance companies for refusing to cover the income lost when the 2020 season was canceled. The teams all had standing business interruption policies. Commercial Chapter 11 filings surged in the first half of the year as the pandemic shut down businesses. The number of filings was up 26% from the first half of last year. The Supreme Court agreed to reinstate streamlined permits for all pipelines across the country, except for Keystone XL.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
Now, in other legal news, the Supreme Court has ruled that states can require members of the Electoral College to vote for the presidential candidate who won statewide balloting. The unanimous ruling involved a case where 10 so-called faithless electors voted or tried to vote for someone other than Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton in 2016. For more on the decision, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks to Richard Briffault, a professor at Columbia Law School.
After the oral arguments in this case, was this decision expected?
Yes, I think it was. I think the justices, many of them were concerned about this idea of potential chaos if the states could not make sure that electors would cast the votes that they were elected to cast. There is the constitutional argument that the original intent of the framers was to actually have the electors use their judgment. But our practice since almost the beginning of the country has been for the electors to vote the positions that they were chosen to take. And so I think as presidential elections are in practice popular elections, even if we still have to use the Electoral College, I think the justices were showing in the oral argument the sense that it made sense to have the states be able to require the electors to cast the votes that they were chosen to cast.
There are more faithless electors in the 2016 presidential election than ever before in history, but how much impact will this decision really have going forward?
Faithless electors are very rare. If you go back for the preceding century, I was looking at this, between 1916 and 2012, there were exactly 9 faithless electors, and that was in 25 elections, and there were 500 electors or more in every one of those elections. So it's a very rare thing. There were a sizable number in 2016, and I think it reflected a lot of the discontent in the country with the choices that people had. It's highly unlikely we were going to have a constitutional crisis due to faithless electors, but I think the value is more symbolic than anything else, but it does kind of confirm the idea that this is a popular election. Admittedly, it's a popular election by states, which is why we can still get a gap between the national popular vote and the national electoral vote. The president is popularly elected on a state-by-state basis. But it is a kind of a confirmation that whatever the intentions of the framers were in 1787, we have moved in a more small d democratic direction.
That's Columbia Law Professor Richard Briffault speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. S&P futures lower, down about 29 points. Dow futures down 284. NASDAQ futures down 50. 10-year Treasury up 230 seconds. Yield 0.66%. And the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. The euro 1.1275 against the dollar. The yen 107.75. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
influential conversation.
The big Volkswagen event is now on. If you're after a new Volkswagen, we offer to pay your first 3 months finance payments and an additional £500 to £1,000 contribution to your deposit at 3.8% APR representative. Hello, sir. Do any take your fancy?
Well, yes, a new Golf or T-Cross. A Tiguan. No, Passat. Oh, I need to sit down.
Here, have a seat.
The big Volkswagen event. With every type of car on offer, you may have trouble choosing. With Solutions Personal Contract Plan until 12th of July excludes e-Golf at participating retailers only. Minimum 46 months to receive 3 months finance payments. Indemnities may be required. Volkswagen Finance. Contact your local retailer to book an appointment.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this morning. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that washing machine can handle all that laundry. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
At Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Tuesday, July 7th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks slump after yesterday's rally.
Coronavirus cases climb in the South while warning signs emerge in New Jersey.
Dr. Anthony Fauci warns on the long-term effectiveness of a vaccine.
And Washington prepares for work on another round of stimulus.
Governor Cuomo says New York is holding its own in controlling COVID-19. Plus, the white woman who called the NYPD on a black bird watcher has been charged. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Mets and Yankees schedules are out, and there's a new highest-paid player in the NFL.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. futures are falling this morning after yesterday's rally. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 28 points, Dow futures down 282, NASDAQ futures down 51, the DAX in Germany is down 1.4%, CAC in Paris down 1.2%, and the FTSE 100 down 1 1/3%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 0.66%, the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1 1/4% or 51 cents at $40.13 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.6% or $9.70 at $17.83.90 an ounce. The euro 1.1273 against the dollar, and the yen is at 107.72. Nathan.
Karen, coronavirus infections across the country are climbing, and state and local officials continue to clash over what measures to take. In Florida, Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez is rolling back reopening plans, closing restaurants and gyms.
What we need is a plan and a strategy that is long-term and that is calculated to defeat COVID-19 in our community.
At the same time, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is reassuring residents there's little to fear from the outbreak.
There's no need to really be fearful about it. I mean, we can talk about the different steps that individuals can take, that we're going to take statewide. But at the end of the day, this is something that's been around for quite some time.
The latest data show Florida cases hitting a record on a rolling 7-day basis.
In California, the rate of infections continues to climb, yet plans for a slow reopening continue. And here with the latest is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
The governor says positivity rates continue to grow quickly.
We were at 4.9% positivity rate just 14 days ago, and now again it's 6.8%. You look at the 7-day positivity rate. It's now over 7%.
And he says hospitalization is up 50% over the 14-day average. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Ed. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy is growing concerned about a climbing transmission rate.
For every new case of COVID we are seeing, that case is leading to at least one other new case. This means increasing rate of spread statewide. This is an early warning sign that, quite frankly, we need to do more.
Murphy says infections brought from other states helped drive New Jersey's transmission rate to the highest level in 10 weeks. The state has a mandatory self-quarantine in place for travelers from 16 states.
Any vaccine to ward off the virus could be limited in how long it protects against infection. That's according to Dr. Anthony Fauci.
We're going to assume that there's a degree of protection, but we have to assume that it's going to be finite. It's not going to be like a measles vaccine. So there's going to be follow-up in those cases to see if we might need a boost.
Fauci says initial vaccine should be enough to get us through the first cycle of the virus. He still expects word on the viability of a shot by year's end.
For lawmakers in Washington, the question is how to keep the economy afloat as we wait for a vaccine. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with more. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. The fight against COVID-19 promises to drag on, and that reality is setting in for the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell.
We had hoped we'd be on the way to saying goodbye to this healthcare pandemic. Clearly, it is not over.
McConnell expects Congress to pass one final coronavirus rescue bill later this month. Meantime, the Labor Secretary, Eugene Scalia, pins hopes for a quick recovery on states reopening. Despite rising cases, he spoke on Bloomberg's Balance of Power.
We can continue to safely reopen as long as we're careful. And again, as long as we bear in mind the lesson that we've observed in California, Arizona, and elsewhere.
Scalia tells us there are no plans to extend unemployment benefits beyond their current scope. He expects extra $600 a week benefits to expire at the end of this month as scheduled. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Global stocks are lower after yesterday's rally. Chinese equities were the lone bright spot in Asia overnight. And Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. The CSI 300 held on to 5-year highs, up another 0.6% on the close, while the Shanghai Composite had a more modest gain of 0.4%, rising for a sixth session. The offshore yuan briefly strengthened through the $7 per dollar level for the first time since March. Elsewhere, equity markets fell in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong and Singapore. In Singapore, Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thanks. Tensions are rising in Hong Kong as police are given sweeping new powers under China's new national security law. And we get details from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis.
Police can now search a premises without a warrant issued by a judge. They can conduct online surveillance and seize electronic devices. Officers can freeze assets and seize property if the security minister says it's warranted. And they can take your travel documents and prevent you from leaving Hong Kong. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calls it Orwellian censorship. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Brian, thank you. On the corporate front, we have earnings from Samsung. Profits beat estimates thanks to increased chip demand. Gadget sales are also showing signs of recovering. The strong results from Samsung suggest the tech industry could be climbing back from the pandemic.
Bayer, known as Bayer in the U.S., has seen its Roundup settlement hit a roadblock. A federal judge asked to oversee the lawsuits has tentatively rejected the proposal. He's calling for a court hearing later this month. And shares of Bayer are down almost 6.5% in Frankfurt.
Watching shares in Novavax this morning up more than 28% in early trading. It reported funding from Operation Warp Speed to a total of $1.6 billion for COVID-19 development for the manufacturing of a vaccine candidate. We'll be watching shares of Novavax throughout the morning. Futures are lower this morning. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Okay, Karen, thanks. It's 6:07 on Wall Street. Now let's get more on what's happening around the world from Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the state is holding its own in controlling the coronavirus. Cuomo says in the 7-week stretch since the start of reopening the state, we're actually down from where we were since the beginning. As for New York City, Cuomo urged residents to remain vigilant.
New Yorkers did the impossible. We went from the worst infection rate in the United States to the best infection rate in the United States. I like to say that we crossed the mountain.
New York City entered Phase 3 of reopening yesterday. Westchester and Hudson Valley enter Phase 4 today. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy talked about his plans for reopening the state.
Summer camp and educational programs for our youth have been green-lighted to reopen. Outdoor graduations may be held to celebrate the class of 2020, and NJ Transit returned to its full weekday schedule. We are continuing down our road back.
Governor Ned Lamont says Connecticut will delay Phase 3 of its reopening indefinitely to avoid the COVID-19 resurgences other states are seeing. Connecticut was set to begin Phase 3 on July 20th. Atlanta's mayor says he has tested positive for COVID-19 despite having what she describes as no symptoms. Keisha Lance Bottom says her symptoms were more like her seasonal allergies. The 50-year-old Democrat is among the women named as a potential running mate for presumptive presidential nominee Joe Biden. A white woman who called the police on a black man watching birds in Central Park in May has been charged with falsely reporting an incident, a misdemeanor. Amy Cooper had accused Christian Cooper of threatening to attack her after he asked her to keep her dog on a leash. Cooper is scheduled to be arraigned for arraignment on October. She faces up to a year in jail and probation. Jeffrey Epstein's longtime confidant, Ghislaine Maxwell, has been transferred from a New England jail to Brooklyn to face charges she recruited girls for him to sexually abuse. The 58-year-old was arrested last week. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. 6:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Here's John Stanshauer.
Thanks, Nathan. Move over. Mike Trout. His contract with the Angels is for a mere $425 million guaranteed. Patrick Mahomes' new 10-year extension with the Kansas City Chiefs is for $477 million. He could make $503 million. Yes, over $500 million. Although in the NFL, no sure thing, Mahomes is still playing in Kansas City when the deal ends in 2031. The contract is staggering. Mahomes is only 24 years old, sat on the bench as a rookie, and then won an MVP, and then won a Super Bowl. It had already been widely reported the Yankees' first game, July 23rd in Washington, and now the entire schedule is out. After 3 games in D.C., the Yanks move up to Philadelphia for 2, and then they host the Phillies for 2. As for Subway Series games that you cannot take a subway and attend, Yanks and Mets starting August 21st at Citi Field, and then a week later in the Bronx, the Mets opener July 24th at home against Atlanta. At least that's the plan. The Dodgers' Mookie Betts and the Cardinals' Andrew Miller have both publicly stated they still have doubts as to whether there's really going to be a season. Atlanta outfielder Nick Markakis, the latest player to opt out, and 3 teams, the Nationals, Astros, and Cardinals, had to cancel their workouts yesterday because they had not yet gotten back results of COVID tests that were taken last Friday. Widely reported, the Stanley Cup playoff games will be held in Toronto and Edmonton, and now word that the Cup Final Series will be in Edmonton. Next week's PGA event, the Memorial in Ohio, was to be the first to allow in fans, but with the virus surging, they've changed their mind. John Stanshauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
And, John, there's not much evidence of love for tennis as colleges look to trim their athletic budgets during the pandemic. According to the Associated Press, tennis programs are the only sports to be eliminated by more than 4 Division I schools since the outbreak began. The head of the Intercollegiate Tennis Association says many of the cuts may have already been in the books, so it might have been easier to make them now when people are focused on the virus. S&P futures are lower by 29 points. Dow futures down 291. NASDAQ futures down 52 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
When family video calls are too good to miss, your virtual quiz team is demanding a rematch, and one more episode just isn't enough. You need loads of data. Get a massive 30 gig for £10 a month from Smarty Mobile. With no speed restrictions, unlimited calls and texts, and a flexible 1-month plan, it's no wonder you Switch awarded Smarty Best Value SIM-Only Network 2020. Search Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. See smarty.co.uk.
Honda. We're not a car company. We're more of a listening company. And now our ears have brought our attention to where people feel most comfortable. The lounge. So we asked ourselves, what could Honda do to innovate in this space? Well, how about more space? Calm and uncluttered, with modern yet retro styling, and built-in screens compatible with your games console. It's the most comfortable lounge you've ever driven. Introducing the new Honda E, our small electric city car. Honda. The power of dreams.
Two conversations from Bloomberg Television. We closed position on British pound at 124.79.6, so £1,000 in profit.
RF John Mohammed, a partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners. You've been focused on advising companies about how to deal with so much uncertainty ahead. You've got companies facing some pretty critical long-term decisions here. How do you think companies should be approaching this?
There's a lot that's happening in the world right now. One is COVID, second is immigration, third is a potential economic downturn. I think companies should be thinking long-term, not short-term, but also really thinking about how they could manage their short-term cash needs and balance that against coming out of the potential downturn much stronger. And for us, from our portfolio perspective, we've been spending a lot of time with our portfolio founders, really thinking about how to maximize cash runway, how to make sure that they have enough cash for the next at least 2 years, how they're thinking logically about hiring, how they're thinking logically about growth over the next few quarters and then next year, and then how they invest in technology.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We continue to watch shares of Novavax. They're up 35% around now. And we Told you earlier, after it was awarded a $1.6 billion in funding from Operation Warp Speed to support large-scale manufacturing of a COVID-19 vaccine, those shares are moving higher this morning, that crossing the Bloomberg just a couple of minutes ago. S&P futures are down 30 points this morning. Dow futures down 308. NASDAQ futures down 62. The DAX in Germany is down 1.6%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.4% or 56 cents at $40.07 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.5% or $8.90 at $17.8470 an ounce. The euro 1.1278 against the dollar. British pound 1.2483 and the yen 107.68. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the U.S. death rate from COVID-19 has surpassed 130,000. Bloomberg's John Tucker has more in this live report.
And Michael, infection rates across the country are climbing. Florida cases hit a new high on a rolling 7-day basis. Still, Governor Ron DeSantis there is reassuring residents there's little to fear from the outbreak. That's leading to a clash with local officials. Miami-Dade's mayor is rolling back reopening plans. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy says infections brought from other states helped drive New Jersey's coronavirus transmission rate to the highest level in 10 weeks. And in California, the rate of positive infections continues to climb as plans for a slow reopening continue. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, John. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp declared a state of emergency and ordered the National Guard into Atlanta to protect government buildings after protests against racial injustice turned violent over the weekend. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. 6:19 on Wall Street. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. Sam Stovall joins us now, Chief Investment Officer at CFRA, as we continue to watch the pullback for equities after 5 straight sessions of gains for the S&P 500. I wonder, Sam, if you see any further upside for this market, or do you think we've hit a resistance level?
Well, first off, good morning. No, I think there's still some upside for this market. Right now, as investors are entering the second quarter earnings reporting period, they realize that all 11 sectors are expected to post declines, that 90% of the 125 sub-industries are expected to post year-over-year declines, and with the market itself expected to be down 45% in terms of earnings,